We are conducting this business on the unceded territories of the Hupa-Chesed and Shesat First Nations, and we are grateful for your opportunity to do so. I would also like to recognize that we have directors calling in from other First Nations territories, and I want to acknowledge those First Nations with our respect and our gratitude. And before we get into the formal part of the meeting, I have a short statement I would like to read, if that's all right. I just want to acknowledge the many people who have worked tirelessly the last few days to help ensure that our community is safe and that it stays safe. Firstly, I want to thank the ACRD and the staff at our Emergency Operations Center for acting so quickly, efficiently, and have put in many, many, many hours of hard work during this crisis. And a special shout out to Karen Freedy for being on the job for one day and then having to put in an operations center in place. So thank you so much, Karen. Thank you to the Beaver Creek Fire Department for volunteering to help set up the reception area. Thank you to the Salvation Army for feeding everyone at the reception center dinner and also breakfast the next day with very little notice. And also want to thank the province for giving our community so much support. I know that many different ministries and government bodies are working together to help us get through this emergency. And I want to especially thank all members of our community for pulling together and helping each other. And a very special thank you to the brave firefighters who are working not only at this fire, but all the wildfires throughout Canada. Please stay safe. And I know I've forgotten many, many people who have helped through this crisis. So I just want to thank anyone and everyone. And I just want to mention our small business community. Our small businesses were looking forward to a very busy summer, but that summer season has been cut short. So I really want to encourage all residents to support our retail stores, eat out at our local restaurants. And let's take this opportunity to take a holiday and explore our own backyard. There's never been a better time to visit Ucluelet and Tofino in the summer. With all emergencies, you will learn from them, and I'm sure there'll be lots of debriefs and lots of conversations with the province when this emergency is over. But for now, let's continue to help and support each other. Thank you so much. So next we'll go into introductions. We can see who's on the screen, but I'd like to go around the room and we can all introduce ourselves. My name is Deb Haggard. I am the City Council for the City of Port Alberni, and I'm the appointed representative to the ACRD, and I'm the Vice Chair. Chair Jack is not able to be with us today, so I will be chairing the meeting. So next we'll go to Jack. If you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Jack McClellan, alternate director for Beaufort.
Mike Sparrow, director for Cherry Creek.
Penny Cody, Sprout Lake Electoral Area Director. Thank you.
Susan Roth, Beaver Creek Director.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Zenner, Manager of Administrative Services.
Good afternoon. Wendy Thompson, General Manager, Administrative Services for the Regional District.
And I'm Mike Hurd, General Manager of Planning and Development for the Regional District.
Thank you, everyone. And we do have a new director, but I don't see her on Zoom. Do you see her anywhere? Where is she? Oh, there you are. I'm sorry, I didn't see you. I would like to welcome our new director, Lavana Mastrangelo, representing the Ucluelet government. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves to the board, Lavana.
Hi, thank you. Lavana Mastrangelo. Yes, current executive legislature member of the Ucluelet First Nation government, and currently holding the asset management portfolio. I'm stationed out of Campbell River and also work full-time over on the West Coast. So I'm in Tofino a lot. Some of you maybe know me, maybe not. I'm also with CIRMAC Canada as their Senior Reconciliation Advisor and have been with them for the last 4 years. Yeah, I could go on a little bit more, but actually my background's microbiology, biochemistry, and very familiar with the board processes, and have also been a member of Ucluelet First Nation government in their Lands and Resources Department as their interior manager back in 2014. So very familiar with the coast in this area, and I'm across both places. So thank you.
Thank you very much and welcome to the board. We look forward to working with you, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you moving forward. So don't hesitate to reach out to either the staff or one of the directors. Would be more than happy to help. Okay, first is the approval of the agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda by the directors? Director Roth?
Yes, if I could please add to unfinished business a response from the Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department's mail out.
Thank you, Director Roth. And Director McClement, I believe, is going to read a statement from Director Boyko under 9.2. Any additions from the corporate officer?
No other additions. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda, including the late items? Moved by Director Roth, seconded by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is declarations, conflict of interest or gifts exceeding $250 in value as per section 106 of the community charter. Great, seeing none, we'll go on to adoption of minutes. First is the Board of Directors meeting, May 24th, 2023. Is any errors or omissions? Seeing none, could I get a motion that the minutes of the Board of Directors meeting held on May 24th, 2023 be adopted? Moved by Director Roth. Seconded by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is minutes from the Alberni Valley Regional Airport Advisory Committee meeting held on June 6, 2023. Any errors or omissions? Could I get a motion that the minutes of the AVRA Advisory Committee meeting held on June 6, 2023 be adopted? I'll move by Director Cote, seconded by Director Roth. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Excuse me. Next is West Coast Committee meeting. Is it held on June 7th, 2023? Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, could I get a motion that the minutes of the West Coast Committee meeting held on June 7th, 2023 be adopted?
Move adoption.
Moved by Director, who said that?
Director Steer.
Director Steer, second by Director Roth. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. We have some presentations today, and I think our CEO is going to be doing these via Zoom. Are you there, Daniel? There you are.
Hi, I am here. I'd rather be in the room with you for this, but you know, I'll take Zoom. It's better than nothing. So, Madam Chair, there are 3 different employees of the Alberni Cloudcoat Regional District that we would like to recognize today. I'll do each one at a time, and so I'd like to start with Brett Morlock. Brett is our building inspector and building bylaw enforcement officer. In the past couple of weeks, I also have to thank Brett for being a valuable member of our Emergency Operations Center, specifically logistics and specifically fuel and barges. And so he is he has been an incredible part of the team, and his learning has been matched with ours as we learn about supply chain issues. Brett has now been with the ACRD for 5 years, and he's currently a level 3 building inspector. And beyond the work that he's doing with the ACRD, he's also, I think some members of the board will remember that he's recently been helping the city of Port Alberni with their level 3 building inspections, as well as they had some transitions. So he's definitely a great employee and somebody who's contributed quite a bit to the region and to the community in the last little while. And I want to recognize him and thank him for his 5 years of service. Madam Chair, I'm not sure if he's in the room, if there's any pictures or handshakes, so I'll pause here.
Congratulations. Present.
And then photo.
Go on to the next one.
Okay. The next employee that I want to acknowledge is Wendy Hayes. Wendy is currently our community services assistant. She just started a few months ago after leaving our finance department. She started with the ACRD as a casual administrative assistant, then spent 4 years with our finance department as an accounting clerk before recently transitioning to the community services team. Wendy, also affectionately known as the Good Wendy, is an awesome part of our team as well, and definitely adds to all levels. She's supported and contributed towards each one of the departments in different ways through finance and now through the community services. And everyone loves her baking as well. and really, she adds a lot to the fabric of our team, both professionally and of course, in terms of morale and team spirit. Wendy, if I want to give you a high five, and I see that now the room is setting up. So I will hand it over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Last but not least is Terry Fong, our Chief Financial Officer. There's a lot that can be said about Terry, and all good. I will try and keep it brief. Terry started with the ACRD as an accounting clerk and has worked in numerous roles in the finance department before becoming the Chief Financial Officer in 2011. Terry has been with the ACRD for 15 years. And yeah, that's almost half her life. I want to make note that Terry is a vital part of our organization. She works closely with every aspect of the work that we do. That's both with our political team as well as our operational team. She has incredible knowledge, insight, and leadership. And we've certainly seen examples of that leadership over the last few years with Terry. And so I really want to thank her and acknowledge her for her great service and ongoing service to the ACRD. She too has recently been part of our EOC. And talk about maneuverability. Terry can move from one part of her EOC, finance, to planning, to logistics with ease. She demonstrates her knowledge and her training and on every time that we sit down and meet. And so I want to thank you for all your service, Terry, and so grateful that you're part of our team.
I'm just going to add a couple of sentences about Terry. I'm going to really age myself here, but I've known Terry since she was in junior high school at Mount Clitza School. So it's gone back a few years. She was a rock star then, and she's still a rock star. And I'm just so happy to be working with her. Thank you.
Yeah, let's do a group picture. Oh, that's better with you.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, as I see you walking back, I just want to thank Brett, Wendy, and Terry for their dedication to both the region and to all of those that they work with. The ACRD is blessed with a really good team, and these three members are three of a larger team that is absolutely stellar. So I want to thank Brett, Wendy, and Terry for their dedication. I want to thank them on behalf of all of their team. I know that staff members will be reaching out to them as well. Thank you.
I want to echo that on behalf of the board as well. Thank you so much. Next on the agenda is correspondence for action. And there is a request for UBCM childcare resolution, an email from the Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC dated June the 7th, 2023, regarding UBCM childcare resolution. And there's a possible motion here. And I was wondering if anybody would like to have a discussion or comments or would like to make up the motion. Director Roth.
I would like to move the motion as written.
Thank you. Could we get a seconder? Second by Director Cote. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And there is an email from the Port Alberni Community Action Team regarding International Overdose Awareness Day 2023. And there are some possible motions here. We can take one or more or not take any of the motions. So I would like to have a discussion on the floor, or if someone would like to make a motion. Director Cote.
Thank you. I think that what we could do is issue a proclamation recognizing August 31st as the International Overdose Awareness Day. And that would be my motion.
And I'll second that motion. Thank you. Is there any questions or comments? All in favor of that motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. However, I would really like to encourage you, if you're able to attend the conference at the International Overdose Awareness Day on August 31st, 2023 at Echo Center. It is from 12 to 6. But it's going to be set up so you don't have to stay for the whole 6 hours. You can pick and choose what portions you want to go to. I will be attending, and I hope that if you have the opportunity that you'll be able to attend as well. And I'm going to suggest that on the third motion, maybe we talk about making a meeting with the Ministry of Health and Addictions at UBCM conference to talk about addictions and the opioid crisis in our community. And I think for the fourth motion, if you choose to do so, I don't think we need a motion for this, but please, if you are able to, light a candle in your home to remember people who passed away from an overdose. I think all of us have either friends or family. They're in an addiction crisis right now, or maybe you've lost someone from addiction. So let's take the opportunity to remember them. Correspondence for information. We have a letter dated May 24th, 2023, opposing bylaw changes that impact small food producers, small businesses, and market gardeners. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding this letter? Dr. Roth? Oh.
Yeah, I just would like to highlight that the Alberni Farmers Institute are asking for an immediate moratorium on the proposed bylaws, and that extensive and thorough consultation continues with residents, farmers, and agricultural operations. That's important, I think, and I just wanted to highlight that they're requesting it. They're also requesting that all rules and regulations proposed for this region should be reflective of each unique electoral area and should champion the needs of producers growing, investing, and operating in this region. And that's something too that Beaver Creek wants, is we want individual regulations for our area. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Roth. Next is Director McClellan and then Director Beckett.
Yeah, it's working. I noticed that this is just for information. Are they going to get a response? Because really what they're definitely asking for something here. They're not just telling us what they feel. They would like a positive response, obviously. And I guess, you know, the few things I've done lately, when I was alternate director for Cherry Creek for a short while, I attended a meeting. There was a lot of strong feelings about what they're writing about. So I think there's probably a lot of people out there would like a response, and probably maybe later on in the meeting or some other time it'll be something we could do.
CO, can you respond to that for me, please?
Yes, I think it is somewhat addressed later on in the agenda when we talk about the revised outreach for the zoning bylaw. there'll be a good opportunity to speak to the various aspects that have taken place there. And it might be better to move the conversation to that portion of the agenda. I know that staff do have quite a bit to say in terms of the outreach that was done and is ongoing with the agricultural producers. And so I can say that this letter caught us by surprise given the volume of outreach, but it will be something for us to discuss later on the agenda with the plan that the planning department put forward.
Thank you. Director Becca.
Thank you. And perhaps I can defer this until later on in the agenda, as Daniel suggests. However, my initial thought was perhaps the organization would be prepared to do a presentation to the board so that we can better understand what their concerns, objections are, and what their preference would be moving forward. Because while I appreciate the correspondence from them, it is rather vague as to what their concerns are.
Thank you, and I think that's a great idea. Director McClellan, would you like to read the motion, please?
Letter dated May 24th, 2023, opposing bylaw changes that impact small food producers, small businesses, and market gardeners. I would make that motion and add that they should get a reply.
Second by Director Roth. Yes.
Can we add to it that an invitation to come to the board to make a presentation?
I'm wondering, Daniel, do you want to talk about that later on, but having them come in when we talk about the communications plan?
We can, or we can add it now. It is a good motion to ask for that clarity, because I think to some degree, staff are also seeking it. There was a lot of change that was brought forward based on comments that were already collected from them. So it'd be good to have that additional detail as Director Beckett had flagged.
So everybody understands the motion? Any final questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is request for decision, amendment to bylaw A1087 ACRD, Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy 2019. And Wendy Thompson, General Manager of Administrative Services, is going to speak on this.
Thank you. So as most of you are aware, Heather Zenner was hired as our Manager of Administrative Services at the end of May. Part of her new role will be to support my position, General Manager of Administrative Services, with freedom of information and protection of privacy requests, and also to act as the Information and Privacy Coordinator. Currently, our FOI bylaw has myself designated as both the head and the Information Privacy Coordinator for the purposes of the FOI Act. So attached for consideration of 3 readings and adoption by the Board of Directors is an amendment appointing or designating the Manager of Administrative Services as the Information and Privacy Coordinator. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Wendy. Is there any questions? Dr. Cote, would you like to read the motions, please?
So I've moved that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors give first reading to bylaw A1087-1, Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Freedom of Information and Privacy, Protection of Privacy Amendment 2023.
Seconded by Director Coots.
Thank you. Any final questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Please go on, Penny.
I'll give second reading.
Second by Director Roth. Any final questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
I would move third reading.
Second by Director Roth. Any final questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried.
Move adoption of bylaw A1087-1.
Seconded by Director Roth. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next is 2023 UBCM Convention meeting request with the Premier Cabinet Ministries and Ministry staff. Wendy, maybe you could perhaps explain to our new directors how this all works. They might be new information to them. They're not quite sure how it all works.
I'd be happy to do that. So annually, the Union of British Columbia Municipalities holds a convention. This year it's in Vancouver, September 18th to 22nd, and it's in person. The Regional District Board annually receives an invite from the Premier and from the Minister of Municipal Affairs, inviting local governments to request meetings in conjunction with UBCM on any issues concerning their communities. On the report, it shows the meetings that we requested last year and that we were successful in receiving. The deadline for these requests for minister meetings or premier is June 30th. So staff are asking the board to consider which meetings they would like and to let myself know by June 23rd so that staff have enough time to prepare backup documentation to go along with the request. And if staff can also meet at ministry staff level staff at the convention, that deadline's a bit later. So if there's requests for that, I can assist in processing those as well. The West Coast Committee met on June 7th, and they've identified 2 meetings that they would like to have at UBCM or request. One is with the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change regarding expanding the recycling regulations, in particular around mattress recycling. And the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure regarding funding for the West Coast Transit Service. So if there's any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them.
Thank you, Wendy. That was a good explanation. Dr. McClement?
Yeah, if this is the time, Director Boyko would like to attend the Minister of Highways meeting and talk about a thing called the Horn Lake Connection. It'll be talked about for a long time, but maybe this time, maybe someone will believe us that we have only one road into here. The Highways Department kept telling us it wasn't true that it was ever shut down. Well, have a look.
I think that's going to be a big topic of discussion moving forward. Director Coos, then Director Beckett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do support that we move forward with the Minister of Transportation, but I don't believe that we should pigeonhole ourselves into a Horn Lake connector. I think we should term it as an alternate route because for many reasons. And I know Director McClement and I worked previously at the Transportation Committee that's now been disbanded. And I think it's time that we move forward in revitalizing that committee and moving forward. So I think if we can work with staff offline and revitalizing that sort of discussion, because the entire West Coast was shut down as well as the Alberni Valley. It is a longer route around that we have now, but it's proven that it's proven our case that something needs to be done. We need a serious look at this. So whether we stop at the Minister of Transportation or we start talking to Premier Eby and moving forward in that way. So I look forward to those discussions. True.
Thank you, Director Coates. I appreciate that comment. Director Beckett.
Thank you. Further to Director Coates, I agree that I don't think it should just be the Horn Lake route that we have discussion on. I would like to see the Banfield Road completion and the Banfield and Cowichan Road alternate road be identified and part of that 30,000 foot view for both the Alberni Valley, Banfield, and the Dididat Nation. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Director Cote?
Thank you. Just some more information on UBCM resolutions. AVICC had resolutions that were approved from through the AVICC process of resolutions that will be forwarded on to UBCM. And as far as the meeting with Ministry of Transportation at UBCM, I think that really we should have a meeting before UBCM with the Ministry of Transportation, can include that with our requests for appointments. But I think that this is something more important that we need to get in front of the province before UBCM. And so I'd like to see the regional district actually ask for a meeting with the Ministry of Transportation. That would be give the city of Port Alberni, to Ucluelet and Tofino and all rural areas here, First Nations, the opportunity to talk to the province and request a second exit and entrance to our communities. So thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Cote. Wendy.
Sorry, I was just also going to add that we do our best to coordinate with the city of Port Alberni and member municipalities and the First Nations to make sure that our requests align and work together on this.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest maybe we should wait until this crisis is initially over. And I'm sure the Emergency Operations Center will be having a debrief with the province. But I would suggest that maybe we try and set up the meeting. And prior to that meeting, BCM, as Wendy suggested, we all get together and make sure we're all on the same page before we go in there. But Director Cote, I think you're right. When they do have a debrief, I think that has to be the number one topic of conversation. So if that works for everyone. Director Sparrow, would you like to read the motion? Sorry, Director Coos, did you have a comment?
I did. So I was just a matter of process. So whether it's our CAO or Wendy, maybe, what is the process? And I think I know what it is, but what is the process for the ACRD Board of Directors to strike a committee? Wouldn't be a standing committee. It's more born out of an emergency. So we could have these discussions in that format. So it's a matter of process. What do I need to do to start that committee?
Can you answer that, Wendy?
Yes, I can answer it unless I see Daniel come on. So what you could do, Director Coates, is introduce a motion to instruct staff to draft a terms of reference. This would be a select committee because it would be a committee that's just dealing with a certain topic, and when it's done, the committee no longer exists. Instructing staff to come back with a terms of reference for the creation of we used to have an alternate route transportation committee. So something to that effect, and we can bring something back for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Madam Chair, do we have a motion on the floor?
Yes. Do you want to make that motion?
Yes, I will make that motion. I was clarifying whether we had a motion on the floor and I was able to make one. So I will move that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Director Beckett and Director Steer and then Director McClement. Did you have a comment or did you seconding the motion?
I was just seconding.
Director Beckett, is there any final questions or comments to restart the Transportation Committee and instruct staff to bring back terms of reference? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Director Sparrow, would you like to read the motion that's included in our agenda, please?
Okay, thank you. I move that the ACRD Board of Directors provide direction to the General Manager of Administrative Services by Friday, June 23rd, on the meeting request with the Premier, Cabinet Ministers, and/or provincial ministry staff in conjunction with the 2023 Union of BC, British Columbia Convention respecting issues, concerns impacting communities in the Alberni-Connecticut region.
Seconded by Director Roth. Any final questions or comments? Director Steer?
Yes, thank you. Just for clarification, in terms of ministry staff, are we looking at, would our staff be looking at direction in terms of like Island Health, for example, or BC Transit, or I know that that deadline is much further down the road, or would you like that included in this particular conversation?
Wendy?
If directors have requests now, you're welcome to submit them, or you can also contact me directly, and we can work with any directors on any other requests for meetings at staff level or ministry level. Oh, and there's
Dr. McClellan. Daniel, did you want to comment first?
If that's okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and sorry, Director McClellan. I would say that if you know of a subject that you would like to advance to UBCM today, please let us know. It's way easier for us to know today and to know as a group. It could be that there's 3, 4 or more of you that have the same idea, and rather than have 12 emails, I think this is the point of having it on the agenda today. So I would endorse having more rather than less today.
Thank you, Daniel. Director McClellan.
Yeah. Excuse me. The only comment I'd like to make is, I guess my mind is still on the alternate route. And when you set a committee and talk to them, somehow you've got to convince the politicians, the provincial politicians, that they should direct the ministry on how to do this. But this was a real big problem we had. They have the minister under 2 different governments say, yeah, we agree with it. And as soon as we went back to the ministry, they said, no, we don't agree with it. Can't have it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Director Steer?
Yeah, in regards to Danielle's request for further information, just to put it out to the board in terms of conversations at the staff level with Island Health. As a regional initiative, the conversation has been started around a hospital build for Tofino General Hospital as a potential conversation, and as a regional initiative. And I'm looking to the ACRD and the hospital board if that would be an appropriate conversation to have with Island Health. I know we've had as a municipality conversations, but I think as a regional initiative that just having an update and to further that conversation along. If there would be value to the ACRD board, I would suggest a meeting with Island Health in that regard.
Thank you, Director Steer. Director Sega?
I would support that as well. And I'm just wondering if there could also be a mention of a possibility of having respite care included in that build.
Just to clarify, Director Sega, sorry, you're wanting respite care to be part of the rebuild or the new build? Is that correct? Of the hospital?
Yes, if the feasibility of respite care being offered on the West
Thank you.
Coast could be considered.
Thank you. Director Steer, did you have another comment?
Yeah, through the chair, just in response to Director Siga, that conversation happens during the consultation phase, which is in process as we speak. So I know that there will be community outreach very shortly, and that would be where that particular conversation would come into play. I see no harm in it being brought up at the meeting with Island Health. But I know that will be part of the process that will be driven forward in the upcoming year here.
Dr. Sika?
Through the chair, yeah. When we're talking funding, Island Health will want to confine those discussions to acute care facility funding. And I think on the West Coast, we need to have a broader approach and therefore incorporate other kinds of funding for consideration before the build is sort of just sort of pigeonholed into acute care.
Did you have another comment, Director Steer?
I just see that my hand was still raised, so I might as well throw one in there regarding further conversation. I know related to the potential meeting with Minister Fleming. in the discussions around the West Coast Transit Service. I don't know, and I'm looking to Daniel on this particular one, if there would be any call to have a direct meeting with BC Transit to once again reiterate what we have done and that we are still looking for a long-term solution directly with BC Transit.
I can answer, and I see Jenny has come on as well, if I may, through the chair. I think there's value to going back to Ministry of Transportation to talk about West Coast Transit as well. Last year, they tasked us with the challenge to find an alternative way of delivering service. We have met that challenge, but it doesn't mean that we don't want them to pay for it. I think it's important for us to close that loop, go back to them, talk about where we're at, and to continue pushing for the same level of support that the rest of the province appreciates when it comes to public transit.
Did you have anything to add, Jenny?
If I may, I think speaking with BC Transit is imperative, and we do have our operations manager, Eddie, who has set up a very good bridge, and we are keeping them up to date on where we're going. They understand that we need to talk about lots of things because we're envisioning many options for the future. So we are doing that on a staff level, and I think on the political level, I think it is great to talk to the ministry, and I don't know if we need political support for BC Transit just at this point yet, but yes, very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McEwen.
Yes, thank you. At our council meeting last week, we went over the same process with the minister meetings, and we did state that we would like to be involved with the ACRD in a meeting with the transportation minister. If it could be a joint meeting, I guess is what I'm saying.
Thank you, Director Steer.
Yeah, and we had the same conversation with our CAO, and I know that our CAO will be reaching out to your ACRD CAO to further that conversation.
Perfect. There's strength in numbers. Did you want to add to that, Daniel?
If I may, Madam Chair, Nyla has already sent that, so I have to give her credit where credit is due. It's been a busy week, but she did send that through, and was requesting that we work together on the return to the Ministry of Transportation to talk about West Coast Transit. Dwayne has done the same, a very early start. And Madam Chair, I'll just bring forward for consideration for the board. The other matter that was flagged by other CAOs is still the issue of dispersed camping and the concern with fire bans and their effectiveness when it comes to protecting the backcountry of the west of the island. So perhaps we could add a number of these into our resolutions.
Can I just ask you a question? There was a couple of meetings last year regarding revamping the Government Act, modernizing it. Would it be worthwhile to have another meeting on that?
I'm not sure that we're ready to go back on that one. The province has provided a $45,000 grant to 5 different regional districts. We're still setting the table. We were going to have our first meeting on June 26th. The logistics of the road closure might make that difficult. So we're going to rethink or reach out to all those who are going to be at that first meeting to see if that's still possible. But we're still early days on just starting the conversation. I would recommend that we wait until we've advanced that discussion far enough to provide an update to the province. So I wouldn't add it to UBCM yet. I think the same would go for the Island Corridor Foundation when we talk about that. There's a process in play. We're still setting the table, and I would wait prior to reporting back to the province on that one as well. But that said, dispersed camping, we were provided a short-term solution, a 12-month solution by the province. And I think it's fair to say that given the circumstances of the wildfire, we see value to expanding that 1 year to a 3 year or more, so that we can have active patrols in the backcountry. The other meeting that we did have was with agriculture. And I can say that we have had a follow-up meeting with the Ministry of Agriculture to specifically tackle how it is that we can help reduce the cost burden of insurance for our small and medium-sized agricultural producers. We had one meeting with the minister. The minister said that she would come back to us, and we're waiting for that loop to close. And so we may want to pause on a follow-up meeting on that one as well, because I do suspect that it will be a table that is set by the province with us.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm sure if there's any other ideas that we have when we go home and we can't sleep tonight, we're lying in bed and get these fantastic ideas, we can send them to Wendy for follow-up. So we do have a motion on the floor, and it was seconded, I believe. So we just need to vote on it. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next on the agenda is the UBCM Complete Communities Grant Official Community Plan Public Engagement. And that is going to be Mike Erck, General Manager of Planning and Development.
Yes, this report and request for direction to apply for the grant relates to a UBCM grant that would support the official community plan initial public engagement, and relates, to some of the discussions we were having earlier around the Farmers Institute and the zoning bylaw as well. So staff are recommending that the board support this grant application to fund the initial engagement, the initial public engagement for the 6 electoral area official community plan reviews. This work is already part of the department work plan, and the funding would support a comprehensive public engagement process that would be supported by an on-site consultant engagement specialist. Community discussion topics will include options for housing, transportation, infrastructure, and daily needs, which is part of the request the province wants for this grant. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mike? Dr. Sparrow?
I know we had the OCP meeting here for Cherry Creek, and it was lively. I'll give it that. So hopefully we can get this grant and get back to doing OCPs and getting the public engaged. They were very engaged that night, and see what we can do towards the process. Would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions or comments? Dr. Roth, can you make the motion?
Sure. I move that the Board of Directors support the grant application to the UBCM Complete Communities Grant Program for $150,000 in funding for the official community plan public engagement project, and direct staff to provide overall grant management for the project if successful.
Seconded by Director Sparrow. Any final questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Dr. Cote?
Thank you. So to staff through the chair, just wondering how much more time this is going to add to getting things completed. Thank you.
Mike?
So when we get to 9.2, we'll talk about the communications plan, and really this funding would support that work, and we would just be able to reallocate the funding that was going to pay for that to something else.
So really, it's just going to offset the costs we've already budgeted for, correct?
Yes, and it may allow us to build a little bit more robust engagement process. So I'm certainly happy to have a full discussion when we get to that section in the agenda.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is Fire Smart Vehicle Lease. Can we have Terry Fong, our CFO, to discuss this, please?
Great, thank you. So part of our 2-year lease or 2-year grant that we got from the Union of BC Municipalities for Fire Smart was the lease of a vehicle. The reason this is important for us is that this Fire Smart coordinator will be traveling throughout the region, including our remote communities, to do Fire Smart activities. So it is for a lease of a maximum length of 24 months. Those are not super common in the vehicle world. However, we have found an opportunity with Pacific Chevrolet to do that. We did look locally under this process just because of the length of the lease and how quickly we were turning it around. So looking for an exemption from the purchasing policy as we did not go out further. We're on a very tight timeline as the clock started ticking as soon as the grant was announced. And there will be an opportunity at the end to buy out the lease if we so choose to do that, but we'll bring that back to the board. We don't want to make that decision at this time, but the grant was for the lease cost, 100% of the lease cost. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Terry. Any questions or comments? Director Cote?
Thank you. So the lease cost for 2 years would be just over $51,000, which seems pretty extreme to me. My question is, what did we do for the last time that we had this position filled? I don't believe we did lease a vehicle, so definitely not happy with the cost.
Yeah, so that was why we added the lease into the grant this time. Last time he used his personal vehicle, and so it's not realistic for going to Banfield and Salmon Beach, etc. So we've tried to do some shuffling in our fleet that's here, but our vehicles, we don't have a ton of ACRD vehicles, so it is challenging for us to juggle those. We did inquire about them paying for a portion or all of a vehicle if we were to have purchased it, and that was not an option in terms of the grant. So they were willing to pay for 100% of the lease cost, but they weren't in favor of paying for any portion of us buying a vehicle.
Thank you. Director Sparrow?
So they're going to pay for 100% of the lease cost for 2 years, and do we have the option of buying it in our fleet at a lower reduced rate because of that? Is my first question. The second question is, can we get the truck, because we're not bringing new vehicles in right now because the alternate route, they want to scratch them up on the gravel?
Yeah, to answer your first question, yes, we'll have a buyout option at the end of the lease to buy it. We would have to look at what service is needing a vehicle and whether they have the budget room to do that, because this program is going to run for 2 years, and then the board will have to make a decision whether we want to pay it or whether we actually can get some more grant funding for it. The second part of your question is, this vehicle is sitting on the lot. So there is a bit of a sense of urgency for making this decision, because they won't hold it for us for long.
Go ahead, Director Sparrow.
I guess my follow-up question is, do you know what the payout would be at the end of 2 years?
I did, but I don't know off the top of my head. But I'd be grasping at numbers at this point. But it is just an option at this point to do it, and so I think that we would have to wait to see where we're at in our fleet replacement plan and whether this vehicle meets our needs. It is a fairly heavy-duty truck. We don't tend to keep all that many heavy-duty trucks as part of our fleet because we're not always going to Banfield, so it will just kind of depend where we're at that point. But it's definitely part of the lease agreement to have that buyout option, and that won't disappear during the 2 years. I can forward information to the directors if they would like.
Any final questions or comments, Director McClement?
Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to say I congratulate you on shopping local and not going out trying to find some other ones. I appreciate that. But I just wonder why do we need a one-time truck for what this individual is doing? I understand is mostly promoting fire safety, going around to the communities and so on. And it just seems like a lot of money for 2 years. If that's being completely paid by a grant, is that because the grant was increased to do this, or is this taken out of something that the grant would have used otherwise?
The grant for the Fire Smart is very detailed. You have to detail where you're going, what activities you're doing, how much is going to be for remediation, how much is going to be for education. So this was definitely a component of that. And there was no limit on what our application ask would be. So it had not taken away from any other activities. If we were to not proceed with the truck purchase, they would amend our agreement and lower the amount of funding that we would be received. We couldn't reallocate it to another portion of the grant without their permission. The truck is fairly heavy duty because they are going to be traveling to Bamfield. I think they've partnered with a few of the nations and are hoping to get more of the nations on board. I know they're in discussion. So I think Topot is on board at this point. So they'll be traveling out there. They also carry a lot of stuff. So if he's doing the education component of stuff, then he's got a tent and sandwich boards and boxes of pamphlets and tables and all that stuff. And I guess just the roads in general. You're traveling to Bamfield. I don't think we did not advertise this as a 1 ton. We advertised it as a 3/4 ton or greater. And this was what was on the lot and available and what they provided a quote on.
Thank you. Any final questions? Dr. Cote, would you like to read the motions, please? No? Would anybody like to read the motions? Nobody? Director Ross?
I move that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors exempt the lease of a 1 ton truck from the ACRD's purchasing policy request for proposal process, and further that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors authorize the lease of a 1 ton truck from Pacific Chevrolet for the Fire Smart program for a maximum lease length of 24 months and the maximum lease cost of $51,601.20, plus applicable taxes, and delegate authority to the Chief Administrative Officer to authorize the lease.
Thank you. I'll second that motion. Is there any final questions or comments before we vote? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda is ACRD Solid Waste Management Plan Advisory Committee Terms of Reference, and Jenny, General Manager of Community Services, taking this one.
Thank you, Chair. This was brought to the board on May 24th, and Jody Frank presented in detail a little bit of background on solid waste management planning and the project that we were about to undertake. We spoke a bit about the terms of reference, and Jody's unfortunately not able to be here today because she is at a Solid Waste Association of North America conference presenting on the good work she did with Taloquit First Nation and Ucluelethat on our West Coast rollout. She's there with William Severinson, who is a member of Taloquit First Nation, and he is also our educator out there. And so they're talking about all of the good work and the implementation that they did using Nuchalnuth and integration there. So just a really good news story. So following up on that, we had a good discussion at that board meeting about the terms of reference, and we have drafted the terms of reference, which are attached. We have some recommendations, resolutions before the board. One is to support the terms of reference, and then appoint the members to the committee. As a quick refresher, and we're happy to discuss this more, we're looking for 2 representatives from the board. This committee is going to meet about 4 to 6 times a year. And the committee is really made up mostly of members of the community. So this is going to be representation from the First Nation communities, technical members, including municipal staff and agencies, and then a lot of membership that is sort of like communities, individuals, organizations involved in solid waste. So the meetings are intended to do that. The board is still going to be involved regardless. So we'll be bringing this to the board for discussion, presentation. And so although we are looking for just 2 members, everyone here at the table will be involved in being kept up to date, and then also have opportunity for input on the solid waste management plan development, because it's such a core vision and master planning document for us. But we are looking for 2 members to join the committee who will also put in a little extra time. So I will leave it there. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jenny. Is there any questions or comments? I seem to remember at the last meeting that Director Steers was interested in this committee, and I think it's important that we do have a representative from the West Coast, and he indicated he had a passion for trash. Are you interested or still interested in being on the committee, Director Steers?
Well, I still have an interest in TREF, and I don't know if that would still put me on in a role there. I certainly would be, and as Jenny had pointed out, that the full board will be represented at all times and at all places, and there was just a direct interest from the West Coast with the landfill out here. So I'm more than willing to sit on that advisory group and report back to the ACRD board as seen fit.
Thank you. And I know Director Cote expressed an interest as well. Would you be interested in the alternate position? Is there anyone else that would be interested? Director Steer?
Just for clarification, I would be a director appointed as a director, not as chair. I would not be chairing that. I just want to make that
That is correct. The chair of the board would be the chair of this committee.
Right. Thank you.
Is there anyone else interested in these positions? Would someone like to make the motions? Appointing Director Steer. There's a couple other motions, but also appointing Director Steers to the committee and Director Cote as an alternate. Dr. Roth?
I'll make the motion as written and to include Director Steer and Director Cote as the alternate, Director Steer as the director of the committee. I didn't get that out right.
You got it. I'll second that motion. Is there any final questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda is R1036-2 West Coast Waste Materials Regulations and Charges 2023 Amendment. And that is going to be Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. We took this to the West Coast Committee last week and had a bit of discussion about it. Essentially, we are looking to update our curbside collection bylaw to allow us to pick up the curbside materials 1 hour earlier than we currently do. So we pick up at 8 a.m. at the earliest, and we need to pick up at 7 a.m. just in order to meet our landfill hours deadlines. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions or comments? Is there anyone who would like to make these motions? Director Sparrow?
I have a question about this. They always put these things in where they want your containers open at a certain time in the morning, right? Between 5 and 7 a.m. And I feel pity on the guys who are shift workers or loggers because technically they can't do what this is asking them to do. They put it in the morning, but they have to unlock them before 4 a.m. So I know they don't get penalized, but is there any provisions where you can make it so if your work details you cannot do within the time allotted, you can actually not feel like you're outside the violations of the bylaw?
Can you respond to that question, Jenny?
And, we actually hear a lot of this in the city of Port Alberni. So we have talked with them about that. The way that they deal with that, or people who want to later pick up, they've developed a very detailed special request system. And so because there's costs involved in that, like if people need a later pickup, they have started implementing a fee, partly because they did find that some people might have been using that allowance a little liberally. So they just wanted to maybe bring that down a little bit to the number of people who are making those requests. We do not have provisions in our bylaw because we've seen that play out in the city of Port Alberni. Instead, when we get requests from people, we deal with them one-on-one and we say, okay, what's your situation? Why can't you pick it up? And then we talk with them like, can you get a neighbor to do this? Could you do this? And then we work with our waste hauler and we can almost always create a solution for people. I hope that answers those questions.
Does that answer your question, Dr. Sparrow?
Well, they found a way to work so they can get to the people. Yeah. Otherwise, it's very inconvenient. People that are going to work they unlock it and the neighbor gets mad. And next thing they got a bylaw guy tell them they can't unlock it.
Any final questions or comments? Is there anyone who would like to make these motions? Dr. Sparrow.
The Alberni Claycourt Regional District Board of Directors give first reading to bylaw R1036-2 West Coast Waste Materials Regulations and Charges Amendment 2023.
Could I get a seconder? Seconded by Director McEwen. Any final questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Go ahead, Dr. Sparrow.
I give second reading to the bylaw.
Seconded by Director McEwen. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Go ahead, Dr. Sparrow.
Good job. I give third reading to the bylaw.
Seconded by Director McEwen. Any final questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Go ahead.
And that I give adoption to bylaw R1036-2 West Coast Waste Material Regulation and Charges Amendment 2023.
Seconded by Director McEwen. Any final questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is R1033-4 West Coast Landfill Tipping Fee Bylaw Amendment. And this is Jenny as well.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies for back-to-back bylaw amendments. I know it's a lot of resolutions. This one is for our landfill and the tipping fees. We recently took the Alberni Valley landfill tipping fee, same changes for Alberni Valley. So we're looking to adjust the mattress fees from $20 to $23 to recover the cost for recycling those. And we did have a discussion on the West Coast Committee about, again, talking about creating this, making sure that this becomes a stewardship program so that those fees are paid up front. We did follow up with a little bit of research just to update the committee and board. And so it is on the 5-year plan to put mattresses in as a stewardship fee, but we do not see a specific date. So it would be nice at UBCM when talking to the minister about expanding that recycling regulation to address the commercial in rural as well as the mattresses to try and, really emphasize the need for this and the urgency, because the sooner they implement this, the better, and then we can remove those fees altogether. The other fee update is the cardboard. So we're just finding that costs are higher than they were originally. So we're making some adjustments, increasing the fees, and also trying to reduce operational costs. We will review this in 1 year. And then we're doing a policy update so that we have more teeth for people who are not paying their fees, and they can be suspended and their accounts can be terminated if required. And hopefully that will help make sure that we're getting paid on time. Any questions? I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Jenny? Director Cote.
Thank you. Through the chair to Jenny, I'm looking at this and I thought that we had reviewed this at our last meeting and that staff were going to be coming back with more than just this, a review of our fees. And so I'm wondering why we're getting this now. Thank you.
Through the chair. Yes, we have two separate bylaws, one for the West Coast landfill and one for the Alberni Valley landfill. So we put through the one for the Alberni Valley landfill. Unfortunately, it goes to AVB, then the board to pass. And this one went to the West Coast Committee, and now it's coming to the board to pass. And we are in production on the full tipping fee review for the next AVB committee. And so you will have a report in front of you on the full review then. I hope that helps.
Is that good? Any other questions for Jenny? Would anyone like to make these motions? Director Siga.
I'd like to move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors give first reading to bylaw R1033-4 West Coast Landfill Tipping Fee and Regulation Amendment 2023.
Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Director Steer. Any questions or comments before we vote? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Would you like to proceed, Dr. Siga?
I'd like to move that we give a second reading to bylaw R1033-4.
Seconded by Director Steer. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Proceed, Director Siga.
I'd like to move that we give a third reading to bylaw 1033-4.
Seconded by Director Steer. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. And the final motion, please, Director Siga.
I'd like to move that we adopt bylaw R1033-4.
Second by Director Steer. Any final questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda is West Coast Transit Service Contract, and I believe Eddie Kunderman, our Manager of Operations, is going to be speaking on this.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to step in for Eddie as he is working on other things at the moment, and hopefully I can speak to and answer anyone's questions on this. This also went to the West Coast Committee last week, and we are recommending that we award to Pacific Western Transportation and authorize the CAO to negotiate and execute the West Coast Transit Service Provision Contract. This does allow still, once we do the award, we're basically working with Watt Consulting to work on the implementation details moving forward. But once we have a contract issued, then we can work with Pacific Western Transportation, PWT, on the details of implementing this service. The good news story on this one is that the pricing that came in was very good. We work with PWT through BC Transit because they provide the service in Port Alberni, and we're very excited about moving forward on this. The other resolution that is also on this is that there is a grant available, and we're asking for board support to make an application, which will basically help us pay for infrastructure, including bus stops and shelters and all those other construction work. If there's any questions, hopefully I can answer them.
Thank you. I think this is very exciting for the West Coast. It's been a long time coming. Is there any questions or comments for Jenny? Director Cote?
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you so much. This is so welcome, and I'd like to make sure that this report goes to the Alberni Clayoquot Health Network as well. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Dr. Cote, would you like to make this motion?
Sure, I will. I'll move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors award the West Coast Transit Service Provision Contract to Pacific Western Transportation up to a maximum amount of $535,000 excluding GST, and authorize the CAO to negotiate and execute the West Coast Transit Service Provision Contract on behalf of the Regional District, and that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors support staff submitting a grant application to the Rural Transit Solution Fund capital stream for the West Coast Transit Service.
Seconded by Director McEwen. Any final questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next on the agenda is Salmon Beach Solid Waste Hauling Contract. And Jenny, you're speaking to this as well?
Thank you, Chair. Last one, I promise. So the solid waste community needs a contract for waste hauling. We went out for RFP and received one bid from the Ucluelet Rent-It Center. The Salmon Beach Committee has reviewed this, and they're supportive of it. This is a minor increase in price for them, which is excellent considering the inflation that we have been seeing. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Jenny? Dr. Siga?
Through the chair, I would just like to ask, when I was at the last Salmon Beach committee meeting, there was lots of controversy and discussion around whether the Sort-It program would be expanded to Salmon Beach. And I'm just wondering if that discussion had taken place at all. Thank you.
Through the chair, I can provide a little bit of an update. We're actually hitting this sort of twofold. Salmon Beach is getting some upgrades specifically at their site, which is going to allow them to get better recycling and garbage solutions. And we might be able to implement organics. We're still looking at whether it makes better sense for them to compost on site. So we're working through the logistics specifically for them. But really, the other key is that all of the communities will get looked at for their specific waste diversion needs through the solid waste management plan. So we're going to try and take some immediate steps to improve their diversion, but then overall, they're going to get looked at for long-term vision and what can we do to minimize their waste production.
Go ahead, Director C.
Thank you. Through the chair again. I'm just wondering if there has been any initiative taken in discussions with Toquat First Nation in regards to cooperative dealing with waste management, and maybe Kirsten can.
Through the chair, I can speak to that. So we have been working together. We had a West Coast Waste group actually start up, I think 2018, and that was such a productive group. And so we found a lot of synergies in all sorts of ways. And one of them with Toquat was that we did talk about how, Salmon Beach is a small community that's relatively close. What can we do together that would work? Right now, we're still running with the systems that exist. So in the community, in Toquat, they do curbside collection for most things. We were able to support them with a grant application, and they got a recycling C-can basically on site. So that was a great improvement. And also we got them some of the bear-proof bins, because bear safe is such an issue in that community, as well as Salmon Beach, because they didn't have the fence secured area that Salmon Beach has for bears. So we've been doing a lot of improvements, both communities. We are hoping to continue to find synergies and ways that we can work together. But it very well noted. And yes, we're trying and we'll continue to find opportunities.
Any final questions, Director Siga? Are you prepared to read the motion?
Let me see. I got to find it on my page again. Here we go. I'd like to move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors award the Salmon Beach solid waste hauling contract to the Equivalent Rented Center Limited in the amount of $1,799.60 per month, May through September, and $425 per round trip, October through April, plus an annual increase of 3% per year over a 3-year term, with 2 additional 1-year renewal terms upon mutual agreement, and authorize the CAO to negotiate and execute the Salmon Beach solid waste hauling contract on behalf of the regional district.
Seconded by Director McEwen. Any final questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is Planning Matters. Rezoning application procedure options. And this Mr. Erb, our General Manager of Planning and Development, will speak on this.
Thank you. So this first report relates to a report that went to the Electoral Area Directors Committee. That report is on page 158 of your package for information. And the committee recommended that rezoning application reports include the option to not hold public hearings if the application complies with the current official community plan, as per the section or that portion of the Local Government Act. So, based on this direction, and if the board supports this new approach, all style planning staff reports will include the option to not hold a public hearing, as shown on the example recommendations, which is on page 156 of your agenda. All electoral area APCs will still review rezoning applications, and they'll be making a recommendation prior to the board considering first reading or proceeding with a notice when a public hearing is not held. This process will reduce processing times for simpler applications, and I am happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions? Director Sparrow.
Oh, thank you. It says here, we put a notice in 2 consecutive newspapers. Is that all you're going to do, or is there more involvement?
So depending on the application, if it is an individual rezoning application, the notice would also be mailed out to property owners within 100 meters as well. And then as part of so this is the first step. One of the other things that was discussed at the Electoral Area Directors Committee was changes to the procedures bylaw and the signage. So, hoping to have that come in the next month or so. Some options for changing the procedures bylaw, just to have a 4x8 sign posted on individual properties where there's a rezoning application, just so that the neighbors are more aware, and then just improve that notice to them. to the neighboring property owners. Thanks.
Go ahead, Director Sparrow, then Director Cote, then Director Roth.
And I have one more follow-up to that communication part. What people have asked me in Cherry Creek is, do you put sandwich boards by the mailboxes in the neighborhood where that development is going to be? Because people will get out and read their mail and they'll read them. But when the sandwich boards are on the side of the road, they can't read the wording as they drive by. But when they're walking to the mailbox, they'll read them. So that was a request that came from the residents.
That's certainly, we use the sandwich boards for a lot of things, and I think that's a great point, and we will certainly note and do that in the future.
That's actually a good idea because I can never read the sandwich boards when it's on the corner of Cherry Creek. Yeah, Director Cote.
Thank you. My question is regarding after an application has gone through the process, there's been requests from the community asking for information out regarding an application, the conclusion as to whether or not they were approved or not. So do we have anything in the works for that? Thank you.
We've certainly had some initial discussions, and other directors individually have talked to staff about, having something on our website that shows the status of applications. And we are in the process of working through a new City View program. It's our database that manages property information, but also our reports and reporting. So I'm hoping by the end of the year, we'll be able to have something in place where that is posted on our website and updated. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Roth.
Okay, I would like to make the motion that the Board of Directors direct staff to prepare rezoning application reports with the option to give notice that a public hearing will not be held as per Section 467 of the Local Government Act when the proposed rezoning complies with the electoral area official community plan.
Thank you. Could I get a seconder to that motion? Seconded by Director Siga. Any final questions or comments? Director McClellan.
Yeah, just the only question I have is, I know that sometimes when you have a public hearing, you're there by yourself and then nobody comes to say yes, no, or maybe so. But when it says here that it's if it's in accordance with the official community plan, what is an example of something that you would see? I got a bit of a problem with just blanket no public hearing, even when people don't come. I mean, they've had the option now and they can't complain anymore. Are we going to have a problem with this?
Great question. So I think there's two parts. So the first part, when would this apply? So if a property, say, is zoned A1, which is a 2-acre minimum parcel size, but it's designated residential in the official community plan, which allows a parcel size of 0.6 of an acre. And they want to rezone it to an RA2, for example. They wouldn't need to go through public hearing. There is still notice in the newspaper, requirements in the newspaper. There's still neighbor notification. While not required, our process would still be for any neighbor or anybody that has any input, they could still write in or email, and staff would bring all of the correspondence to the board to review prior to considering first reading. So if there was, say, significant opposition, or the board felt that whatever that correspondence, public correspondence came in, warranted holding a public hearing, there's still the option to hold a public hearing at that stage after that initial notice goes out. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Any other questions? Director Cote.
Thank you. Also, I'm wondering about interpretation of the official community plan. So there can be different interpretations by people because in some areas of the official community plan, it's quite big. So how would we deal with that? Thank you.
Yeah, I guess that's why you have me. It's part of my job, and we do work with our lawyers. If there's a question, and I think the one that you're referring to, Director Cote, was the Sport Lake Landing. So that one would have required a public hearing under this process. So the community plan contemplated commercial development in the vicinity, but the actual properties weren't designated commercial yet. So to designate a property commercial in the official community plan still requires that OCP amendment. So the community plan can apply in different in different ways, as opposed to the example I provided for Director McClellan. It's really cut and dry. If the OCP says it's residential and the minimum parcel size can go down to 0.6 of an acre, and somebody's applying for a rezoning to create 1 acre lots, that would comply with the OCP. And if there was ever questions, and the board can always ask us or ask to have a legal opinion if it's gray. And certainly my approach is if there's something that's iffy or gray, we will always seek that legal opinion. We want to make sure we're doing things correctly and don't want to have to redo them for no reason. Thanks.
Any other questions, Director Sparrow?
So just for clarification, if it was a change in the community atlas for the OCP, that would be still be a public hearing?
That's correct. And so when we get to the next application, I think is a great example or the next item on the agenda is a rezoning application that requires a public hearing. So I think that's a good example of when we would hold a public hearing, as opposed to not having the option. And I think it's important to note that we will present it as an option. So if the directors voting and the area director and the advisory planning commission have input, or may be aware of neighbor concerns or feel that it's more prudent to hold a public hearing, that will always be an option for the board. And so where it's going to be presented as option 1 and option 2, it's always at the board's discretion on how to proceed.
I think anything that we can do to streamline processes and a little bit less work for staff and make the process go quicker for our residents, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention it when we get to the last item, but we're currently dealing with 50 development applications, and as staff, we don't want to feel like we're holding people up, and we want to move things through in a timely manner. I think it's important for the community. It's important for people when they're individuals making their applications to have a timely decision on whether it's approved or not approved as well. So certainly, important to bring those options for moving forward in a more timely manner.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Any final questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next on the agenda is RD 22007 Danielson 7655 Trail Pit Roads, Front Lake Rezoning Application, Report and Bylaws P1461 and P1462. Mike, can you speak to this, please?
Yes, I certainly can. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, this is an application where if it moves forward, a public hearing is required because it also includes a official community of plan amendment from rural designation to a residential designation to facilitate the proposed subdivision that the applicants are looking at. So to get into the specifics of the application, this is a property at 7655 Trail Pit Road in the Front Lake electoral area. The application is to rezone a 7 hectare or 17.5 acre property from forest rural A3 district. So that is a rural district or a district that has a 10 acre or 2 hectare minimum parcel size to small holdings A1 district, which can have a minimum parcel size down to 2 acres. In order to accommodate a proposed 6-lot subdivision with properties ranging in size from 2.5 to 3.5 acres. The rezoning application will also require an OCP amendment, as I mentioned, from rural to residential use to accommodate the zoning change, and a public hearing is required. Neighboring properties in the area are a mixture of small holdings A1 district, rural A2 district, and forest rural A3 district. So to convert those to area size, it's a mix of 2 acre properties, 5 acre properties, and 10 acre properties. The Front Lake Advisory Planning Commission reviewed the application on May 29th and supported the staff recommendation to move forward, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments? Dr. Cote, would you like to read the motions?
I would move recommendation that bylaw P1461 Sprout Lake Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw be read a first time.
Second by Director Roth. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Please go ahead, Director Cote.
I move that bylaw P1462 Regional District of Alberni-Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment Bylaw be read a first time.
Seconded by Director Roth. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Go ahead, please.
I'd move that the public hearing for bylaws P1461 and P1462 be delegated to the director for the electoral area D, the alternate director, or the chairperson of the regional district.
Seconded by Director Sparrow. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Go ahead, please.
I would move that the board of directors confirm that adoption of bylaw P1461 and P1462 is subject to a confirmation from a registered on-site wastewater practitioner that the property is capable of accommodating on-site sewage disposal to a minimum of 0.8 hectare density, meeting technical referral agency requirements.
Seconded by Director Roth. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. The next one is zoning bylaw review project communication plan, and that's going to be Mike as well.
Yes. This one is all the electoral area directors and Tofino, and I just a brief explanation of why is because the zoning bylaw applies to the entire regional district, and the district of Tofino participates and pays for a vote on rezoning applications within Clayoquot Sound. So the first thing we had dealt with around the rezoning procedures and not holding public hearings only relates to applications within official community plan areas, and all of the official community plans are outside of the area that Tofino participates in. Just wanted to provide that quick explanation. So the intent of this communication plan is to reach out to residents in each electoral area and have dialogue and feedback on individual official community plan, on individual official community plans and potential changes and updates, as well as the draft zoning bylaw. And in addition to in-person meetings, the communication plan contemplates including online and social media engagement. And while the engagement will include all feedback, the intent is to focus on areas that have been highlighted as areas of concern by members of the public. And this relates to some of our public hearings we had and some of the recent feedback that we've had, around the zoning bylaw and the official community plans. Some sections of the zoning bylaw, in my opinion, need some clarification for the public, and others, I think, other sections, need to be reconsidered. And ultimately, that's the board's decision on any changes that are made or not made. I do want to note that talk a little bit about the engagement that's happened to date. So there has been significant public engagement that has taken place. I want to highlight, or I want to note that that's highlighted on page 176 of the agenda. And I just want to go over a couple of things. So since 2019, the ACRD has held 21 open houses, 17 advisory planning commission and agriculture committee meetings, 17 public hearings were held for the OCP amendment, and we've had 11 zoning bylaw project staff report updates to the board of directors or the electoral area director committees. So there's a lot has gone into it to date. There's a table that highlights the timeline from 2021 through to today as well. I do want to talk specifically about the engagement with the agriculture community and highlight some parts of the proposed zoning bylaw. That certainly, in my opinion, and the feedback when we engaged with the agriculture community had that benefit agriculture, and as part of a response to the letter that we got from the Farmers Institute today. And I have to say, as Daniel mentioned, I was a little taken aback by it because we have had a lot of feedback, engagement, and participation from a lot of the members on the Farmers Institute. They sit on our agriculture committees and have participated in that. And I'm not taking away from any concerns that the Farmers Institute has. I think it highlights the need to reach out and do this additional engagement, and it's certainly doing work around zoning bylaws and official community plans are for the communities, and we need to have everybody in the community understanding and making sure that they've had their feedback into these really large projects. And I've got in my notes here, first, the main objective of a community communication plan is to reach out to the community and get the feedback and hear from what the community have to say. I do want to note a couple of things specifically related to agriculture. And Alex's report does talk about things that certainly would benefit agriculture. The proposed draft zoning bylaw would allow agricultural uses in all residential and rural zones. So that currently it only would apply to what is right now our A zones, as opposed to what we're talking about, the smaller 1 acre lots. Don't have that. And also want to clarify for the board and as part of the communication plan, we certainly want to clarify the way the draft zoning bylaw is written. Agriculture use includes farm gate sales. So that's, so if you're allowed agriculture in any residential zone or rural zone, that includes having the farm gate direct sales of anything that you're producing on your property. There's new agritourism opportunities that would be permitted under the draft zoning bylaw. That is something, the feedback we've had from the farming community is something that's important to, obviously not all farmers, but it would benefit a large number of the farmers, and that includes campsites and like daily cabin rentals related to agriculture tourism. We've had some of that happening initially, but the draft zoning bylaw, the way it's written, would allow that as an outright use if you have farm status and you're in the agricultural land reserve. And the revised keeping of animals. So the keeping of animals provisions in the draft zoning bylaw are more permissive than what's currently in the zoning bylaw. And we have, as staff, we certainly, taken the position on some of the current keeping of animals provisions. They just don't make a lot of sense the way they're written. And one of the other big things is we've worked for a long time, with all of us, and at the ACRD, with the agricultural community around abattoirs. And abattoirs is another area that we would expand the use, or what's in the draft zoning bylaw would certainly provide a lot of expansion of abattoir uses in the different zoning bylaws. And that's something we're working with the farming community through our ag plan on expanding abattoir uses and allowing those smaller scale abattoirs on some smaller lots, and then larger abattoirs on large properties in the agriculture zones. I see as something that's a huge benefit to the farming community and really adding to food security. So that was the abattoir, and I'm sure there's going to be some questions. If it's okay, I'll just run through the rest of my notes and then we'll come back for questions. Thanks. So the communication plan would focus on 4 key areas that have really been brought up by members of the public. It's something that's been highlighted recently. So those are, the first one being home occupation and home industry. Certainly when we held the Cherry Creek official community plan, and even prior to that, there were some discussions around home occupation and home industry. So the way our current zoning bylaw is written, home occupation is only permitted inside your home. The draft zoning bylaw, the way it's written, and it's sort of one of the keys that we had going back really to 2011, wanting to expand home occupation to include outbuildings and garages. For example, that's something that people want. And then home industry is certainly something that's not permitted anywhere in the current zoning bylaw, and would be, in the draft zoning bylaw would be permitted on 5 acre lots. I again want to reach out and get more feedback around agriculture, parking, and also around docks. The timeline is highlighted in the report, and will also include using our Let's Connect online and focusing on the 4 key areas I mentioned above. We want to work through and have a weekly zoning bylaw facts information. Small facts going out once a week on Facebook and Twitter, doing some bulk mailouts to the rural areas, having obviously in-person open houses through September and October, and then reporting back to the board in late November. I do want to note that staff's recommendation is to proceed with the updated zoning bylaw with amendments that would be resulting out of this public engagement. There are a lot of new opportunities that would have an immediate benefit to the community, including the agriculture and home business and home occupation, home industry that I had mentioned earlier that would benefit the rural communities. And I do want to note that zoning bylaws are living documents. Updates and changes that benefit the community can be made at any time after adoption as well. And lastly, this will require a significant amount of time and will impact other long-term planning projects and the timelines around those planning projects. And as I mentioned briefly as well, we are working through development applications. So there are 50 active development applications that planning staff are continuing to work on, as well as updating the land use contracts. So that was part of the original report that came to the board in May. And so I will stop there and happy to answer any questions. I'm sure there's lots.
Thank you. Before I go to the board for questions, Director McClemens asked that he read a statement. I'll go to Director Roth.
Thank you. This is from Director Boyko. He sent me an email saying when 9.2 comes, please say this. It'll take about a minute. And then I'd like to ask a couple of questions, but I can wait till after Director Roth. I'm sure there's time. In all previous public engagements over the past years, only approximately 300 members of the public were engaged. We have been able to have more effective public engagement with the same number of people with 2 town hall meetings held by Beaufort Beaver Creek on Sunday afternoons. Why is that? Let's examine the differences. People want to have their voice heard. They don't want city rules coming to the rural areas and don't understand where they are coming from or why now. They don't want to go to public hearings and be recorded. They want to be able to talk and feel their voice and feel their voices have actually been heard. They don't always want to talk with people whom they see as non-decision makers. They don't want to walk around and read the legalized zoning bylaw language on posters. They want to have someone to talk to them and explain things in normal terms. If we don't find a way to actually talk to our constituents that pay for the ACRD, then we will continue to have events like we have seen at recent public hearings. Hiring a communication consultant is a start. I'm not sure about that one there. Having notification on every means available of a meeting more than 2 weeks in advance will help people show up as they have to rearrange their lives to participate. Doing things the same way as the past events is not a viable option, as we actually want the zoning bylaw review project to succeed. Also, I am against the working of a unified bylaw. We have seen a strong mandate for individual zoning bylaws from at least half of the regional districts. Let's wait until the staff report next month, but Beaufort will be supporting individual bylaws for each area. Finally, why are we continuing to try to fast track the zoning bylaws before the OCPs are started, worked on for each area? Whoops. Let's do this right and get the mandate from the people involved for each electoral area. Thank you for your time, Director Boyko, through Jack.
Thank you, Director McClemens. Director Roth?
Thank you. I agree with everything you're saying there, Jack. I'm leaning towards pausing engagement on the draft zoning bylaw and proceeding with the comprehensive updates to the six electoral area OCPs prior to proceeding with the draft updated zoning bylaw, mostly because so often I've heard since I've been here, we can't do things because of what it says in the OCPs. So I think it would be important for each area to do their OCP first. Plus it could match up with individual zoning bylaws as well. Thank you.
Did you want to respond to that, or you want me to keep going to questions, Mike?
I think it'd be good just to get the director's feedback, and then always.
Any other questions? Dr. McClement?
Yeah, I guess aside from my aversion to consultants, sometimes they are important, and this may be one of them. But I notice here in this comment that he's made is that next month there's a staff report coming out. Is that something that everyone knows about and it's coming?
Do you want to respond?
Yes,
to that,
yeah.
please?
So the board had asked staff to put together a report on what the implications and what individual zoning bylaws for each electoral area would look like.
Okay.
And so that will be coming in July.
So yeah, okay, then his request is that. Yeah, if no other, I'd make a amendment motion or something, but oh wait.
Thank you. Any other questions, Director Cote?
Thank you. I don't agree with Director Boyko, and in all due respect, have a lot of history with the regional district. Business has been conducted the way that we have to, by law, by policy, by regulation, and we stick to that. And there's reasons why our business is conducted the way that it is. I understand that people want change and they want more clarity, an opportunity for consultation. My previous history with the regional district is no matter what you do, you're never going to satisfy everybody. You're never going to reach everybody. You don't go knock on their door. Maybe you do. I never did. It's hard work to develop that connection with your community, to get that communication level where they get the news. I did a newsletter. When it comes to the public hearing that has happened recently, wasn't run properly. A public hearing is supposed to be a safe place where someone can come in, whether they're for or they're against an application. And we need to provide, that's our job again, to provide a safe place for someone to come in and speak freely about how they feel about a subject. It's not a public meeting. It's not a public meeting. It's a public hearing. The only person that speaks is being spoken to is the chair, and the chair needs to have control of the representation that comes forward. So I have a lot of issues around what's been happening lately, and the safety of our staff, of our directors, and so I disagree with that part of Director Boyko's comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Cote. Director Sparrow.
I sort of agree with all of you in some aspects, believe it or not. Yeah, the public hearing was a little cantankerous, but that's okay. I've also been to the other town hall meetings, and they do have dialogue, although they don't all have dialogue. There's usually 8-10 people in the group that speak the most, and the rest just absorb it in, which is great. I would like, and I've been asked by the community to come back to a town hall setting, but I would prefer more one like the Log Train Trail out breakout sessions, where the people that are the quietest still have an option to talk and get their views brought forward. It's not a public hearing, and it's not really just to bring the ideas forward. So we get the ideas going, and from there we can actually go into the legal side of it, what we have to legally do to bring it forward to the board. But there are some people out there that are quietly dissenting, but I know they want to be heard. So I'm going to find a way to get them heard in an avenue that doesn't happen what happened here or at town hall, where just a few voices are vocal and the rest is absorbed information. So, thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Cote.
Thank you. I have been asked by directors in the past about public meetings. And I've always recommended take some staff with you or do it through an organization that has a viable clarity to the community as to who they are and that they have recognition rather than an ad hoc or I don't recommend that a director call a meeting on their own just because you don't have all the answers and people can misunderstand your being there to represent them. We all want to represent our constituents, but there is laws and there's rules and policies and regulations that we have to abide by. And that's why staff are really good to sit, have your back and to be able to answer those questions. And then they don't have the answer, then we can get staff to actually look into the answers for our constituents and bring that forward. Thank you.
Dr. Roth. Yeah, Beaver Creek and Beaufort have had 2 meetings with the public, myself and Director Boyko, and we're there to gather information and share information. They're extremely good meetings. We take our direction from the people and we bring it to the regional district. And that's the whole intent. That's what we're there for, to represent the people's best interest. Thank you.
Now, if I'm understanding this motion correctly, Mike, we're not endorsing saying yay or nay, we're just supporting the communication plan, which is what everybody seems to be asking for, is more communication. Am I correct in that?
Yes, that's correct. So we're wanting to just some an endorsement of the communication plan and how it's laid out, as well as the timeline. And if it's all right, if I could just talk about the zoning bylaw versus the OCPs and when the board, when we would be looking to the board to make a decision. So certainly in the report, and I mentioned in my presentation that, the staff, we'd be recommending moving forward with the zoning bylaw, but that would be after the engagement. The engagement will cover, the draft zoning bylaw, and as well as the official community plans, and then we'll be coming back in November with a report and for the board to decide on how best to move forward. I think we need to provide. I guess we need to do 2 things. We need to go out and connect with the residents in the electoral areas, get their feedback, and provide some information. And I think provide the information in newer ways, and then look at where those types of adjustments could be made. And then there's also the report coming for July that would talk about the options for the zoning bylaw, and I think it's important that all of that feedback, the board has all of that information before they make a final decision. Because there's a whole bunch of factors, and really I always look at it, and recommendations are based on what's in the public interest, and that as far as what types of things people can do, how it impacts individual property owners, how it impacts their neighbors, but also the costs of doing it. And we haven't sat down and sort of provided the timing and the costs for individual zoning bylaws, but there will be cost implications for all of the stuff we're doing. And I think it's important that the board has all of that information and the public has that information before making final decisions. And in the end, it is up to the board or the members of the board that vote to make a final decision. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Dr. Roth?
Well, I'm in favor of hiring someone to help with communications. I'm just a little bit worried about doing the bylaws before the OCP, but now that you said that they both could be done together, I'm just worried that, the order. Thank you.
Dr. McClement?
Yeah, if I may, I would like to make a motion that this motion be tabled until after the staff report that's coming next month. We have a secondary I'll explain it, but I don't think a tabling motion gets debated much. I'm not sure about my rules. I got them right or not anymore.
Wendy, when a motion is, someone wants a motion to be tabled, is that it then?
There's no motion on the floor to table, so the correct would be to defer.
Okay,
to defer this report. Is that what you're requesting, Director?
Yeah, the vote on supporting, where to go here? The board of directors endorse the communication plan. The vote on endorsing the communication plan then be deferred until, you're right, there wasn't a motion on the floor yet. That's my error. Until after the staff report next month, and then everyone's got everything, and maybe it would help in the timeline concern.
Do you want to speak to that, Mike? Or
I do. I just reckon I'm looking at timelines, and there's a lot needs to go into this. And the way it's laid out, it is going out, into the end of November. It's still a tight timeline. If we defer for a month or to the board meeting in July, it's going to push everything back farther. And at this stage, what we're looking at is just starting to reaching out to the community. So not looking at holding the in-person meetings until September, but we do want to start pushing information up and getting feedback from people around both the OCPs and the zoning bylaw, and what kinds of changes they want. And so I would, if we push it out for a month and a half or a month, that it will it just pushes us into 2024. So not looking for the board to make any decisions on what direction to go, and we can still have those discussions, around individual zoning bylaws. I expect that will be some of the input we get as we reach out to members of the community. But I would I'm recommending that we start the communication plan and report back to the board, and we would still bring things back. I just want to make sure that everybody understands, if we were to defer it, what the implications could be. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm concerned about that too. And I want to remind you, right, this is just a guideline timeline for the communication plan that we're voting on, not the actual information. So I just want everybody to understand that. Director Roth?
I received this in the mail today, or maybe it was yesterday, notice of bylaw amendment information. Is that part of the communication plan?
If I may, no. So when we paused the zoning bylaw project, one of the motions was to proceed with the accessory dwelling unit size increases for all of. So that's what that is related to, and that was one where we actually the board passed a resolution not to hold a public hearing, and so that is the additional notice that was mailed out, and sort of on top of what's put in the newspaper. You're welcome.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor. Is there any final questions or comments? Dr. Cote.
Thank you. Looking at all of the Let's Connect, and from June 21 to May 23, there's been a lot of communication already, and I really would like to continue on. Like, putting this off for another month and a half isn't going to do anything. So I'm voting against this. I'd really like to see us start that communication, because that's what we are asking for. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Cote. Director Steer?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, could I have clarification on what the motion on the table is, please?
Can you read the motion, please, Heather?
The motion that has been moved and seconded is to defer the motion that was presented in the agenda.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions, Director Steer, on that?
I would reiterate, and I would support Director Cody's explanation that the recommendation of the original motion was that the board of directors endorse a communications plan for the next phase of the zoning bylaw review project, and reviewing the desired outcome, I'm very comfortable with that original motion. So I will not be supporting this deferral, as I think staff have clearly indicated the reasons for this. And when looking to senior staff and getting their explanations, I'm very comfortable with what they brought forward, recognizing that a lot of this does not apply to my municipality, but as a paid voting member in this particular case, I have to support staff in the particular direction. So I will not be supporting this particular motion.
Thank you, Director Roth.
Staff also put forward options to consider, and one of them was to pause engagement on the draft zoning bylaw P1333 and proceed with comprehensive updates to the 6 electoral area OCPs prior to proceeding with the draft updated zoning bylaw. So staff do see that as an option, and that's how I would like to go if we can't defer it.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion? All opposed? Motion defeated. So can we go back to the original motion, Director Cote?
Thank you. I would move that the Board of Directors endorse the communication plan for the next phase of the zoning bylaw review project.
Could we get a seconder? Seconded by Director Steer. Any final questions or comments? Director Roth?
If we can make an amendment to that bylaw, or sorry, not the bylaw, to the motion to, sorry, I'm just going to pull it up here. You know, it would be okay to endorse a communication plan, but perhaps it could be for both or either the zoning bylaw review project or the OCP, the review of the OCPs. I know, but both of them need better communications.
Yeah, but staff has only presented a communication plan for the zoning bylaw review project. So, Mike, will something be coming up with further communication for the OCPs?
No, the intent is that we would be incorporating the OCP, like just the initial communication and getting some feedback from the communities around the OCPs, and so that we can report back to the board on in November, what is going to be the best path for the regional district to move forward with the projects. We do need to get the OCP's work started as well. It's tied to the grant application that we applied. Certainly, clearly, the zoning bylaw and the OCP, when we've done the OCP, specifically around the OCP for updates for Cherry Creek, the last public hearing we had, it was really clear that there was the zoning bylaw and the OCPs were really tied together, and people were mixing the two together, and they are obviously tied together, and we need to go back and engage with the community around the zoning bylaw and the OCPs and how they relate to each other. Hear what people's concerns are. I think that's important. That public hearing for Cherry Creek, there was a lot of angry people. And I don't want to say people were just misunderstood, because I don't think that's a fair characterization. I think they were frustrated. I think we have a role as the HRD in clarifying some of those, but we also have a role in what are those concerns and how should that be approached or rectified. And then as we work through this, how I envision it, we'll be coming back with reports, on how the zoning bylaw could proceed, and the OCPs, and then deciding which comes first, because the part of this is that we're dealing with we had the 50th anniversary of our zoning bylaw. It's really old. There's concerns about it. We as staff, we're hearing a lot of feedback from members of the public around areas of the zoning bylaw that people have been waiting for as well. So it's and if we're not moving that forward, a timeline, the HRD needs to decide, how to address some of those things, because those comments and those concerns from people, are legit, and it's affecting, there's some business implications, there's some development implications. If we're not moving forward with the zoning bylaw, we need to decide, how we approach those as well. And also want to look at some options for, some specific, some zoning specific for each electoral area. It's certainly something that's possible as well. I think that needs to be part of the discussion with the community, and they really are tied to the OCP. So it is the way it's written. It is going to include OCP work as well.
Thank you for that explanation, Mike. Our CEO has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mike. I just wanted to reduce the length of that answer, and just for clarity, what we're proposing here is a plan to engage on the zoning bylaw, as well as to get how we would get started on the 6 OCP amendments. That's what we're proposing.
Thank you. Director Roth?
Then can we amend the bylaw, or sorry, I keep saying bylaw, amend the motion to include wording about the OCP? Just even if it's to say for the next phase of the zoning bylaw review project and reviews of the OCP.
Mike is shaking his head.
Yes, that makes perfect sense.
Okay. Can we get a seconder to that amendment? Second by Director McClellan. Can I get, can we vote on the amendment? So we vote on the amendment first. But you amended the original motion? So if you would like to move forward with the amended motion, please raise your hand.
Well, I don't know how this is working.
Because we have amendment to the motion, you have to vote on it, correct, Lindy? Vote on the amendment.
Yes, so the original motion was the Board of Directors endorse the communication plan for the next phase of the zoning bylaw review project. Then Dr. Roth and Director McClellan passed a motion to amend the main motion to include and a review of the OCPs. So we would just vote on that inclusion of the OCPs first, and if that's carried, then the main motion as amended.
So we're voting just on the amendment.
I have a comment before you vote.
Director Cote.
So I'd really like to hear from staff as to opening up the OCPs at this point. We're just going through the zoning bylaws, cleaning that up so that we could move forward to the OCPs. And I'd like a timeline on OCPs and the cost of what that would be bringing to the regional district, because I've been through a couple of OCPs in 18 years, and they're very time consuming and costly, and that would tie up our staff again. So I'd like some kind of a report back on OCPs, on us moving forward with those at this point. I think that we really need to clean up the zoning bylaws, get that finished so that we can then go into the OCPs. Could staff clarify that? Thank you.
Can you speak to that, Mike?
Yes. So there is money in the budget. Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's $100,000 for this year to start the OCP work as well. And so if we don't get the grant funding we applied for, we would be using that money to engage, to do the initial engagement, and it would be in conjunction with the zoning bylaws. So we'd be holding, the engagement, the open houses would talk about the OCPs and the zoning bylaw within each electoral area, and that's how the work was envisioned and carried out.
Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that we have actually allocated community works funds to the OCP projects. So the plan was to do 2 OCPs a year. I think it's $100,000 a year for 3 years was what's in there right now. And if we were successful, like in that grant application that we talked about earlier, then we would just put that community works fund money back into the pot for other projects and utilize the grant funding, or if and whenever possible, the planning department would speed up the process with the use of extra engagement personnel or staff.
Director Cote.
So we don't really have the funding in place in this year's budget to start working on 6 OCPs. So where do you start in this process? Like, is it going to be Beaver Creek just because, or Cherry Creek just because they're very vocal and they're asking for these changes, or do we have a plan? I'm not in favor of just jumping in and just because we don't have the plan. I haven't seen a plan. It's not clear to me as to how we're going to be moving forward on these OCPs. So, yeah, thank you.
Director Roth.
I think it's Salmon Beach and also Bamfield OCPs first, from what I understand, but I think there is a plan.
Is there a plan, Mike?
Yes. So the idea is to be talking about the OCPs and the zoning bylaw and how they relate, and as we go out and engage with each of the areas to do that initial engagement, to talk about what types of changes each area wants within their OCP, and to do that in conjunction with the zoning bylaw update. That's the. And then that's the idea of this plan. Would we be approaching it that way? And then we would report back in November on what steps. So we've talked about, what would be the next step, and do we move forward with the zoning bylaw, and and have that adopted, and then apply, then how we proceed, and what changes would happen for each OCP.
Okay, I think I'm going to call the question. We can talk this to death. So, Wendy, can you just read the amendment, please, just so everybody's really clear what they're voting on?
Yes, so we're voting on the amendment to include reviews of the OCPs as part of the communications plan.
All in favor of the motion? Is your hands raised, and Director Roth? Are you voting, Director Becca, in favor? Yeah, okay. All against the motion? Motion carried. The amendment. So now we're back to the amended motion.
Back to the main motion as amended.
Back to the main motion as amended. All in favor? Any opposed?
So how do you, I see. I just don't understand.
We had a motion. Yeah. You amended the motion. So now we're voting on the motion as amended to include the OCP. Okay. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Could I make just one comment? I appreciate the ability to read this out from Director Boyko, and I appreciate the patience of doing that. But I would like to just make a comment that I attended the town hall meeting that Directors Roth and Boyko had just recently, and I was very, very impressed with the professionalism and the way that they handled it. Because I happen to know a lot of the people in that meeting, and it was held excellent. And no one was even allowed to criticize directors or staff of the regional district. And anytime someone did, Director Boyko stopped it. So, and I think you should know that. There was no threats, no bad words. I couldn't believe how well it went. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, one more comment and we're moving on.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And very good. Wearing my municipal insurance hat, I just see liabilities coming towards the regional district that could happen. Just, that's my fear. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is staff reports, and Randy Thillen is the Fire Smart coordinator, and he's going to give us updates for the Fire Smart program and highlight goals for the 2023 to 2025 grant.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's been a long afternoon for you, so I'll try and be brief. I'm Randy Thone, and I'm here as the Fire Smart Coordinator for the Alberta East-Lakewood Regional District. Happy to be very pleased to be back for a second run at it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did last year, and then I'm going to outline a few of our goals for our grant, for the 2-year grant that we have now. Thought it'd be interesting to just take a quick overview of what we did for home assessments last year. 47 residential properties were assessed to completion. And when you look at the graph there, the blue lines tell you things that were resilient or a good thing in terms of the assessment. And the red lines talk about what was not so resilient. And when we look at our buildings, so when we look at a property, we look at the building first. So roof, siding, gutters, eaves, and any extensions on that. And we can see that for the most part, other than vents, some of the exterior siding being wood, and some of our decks and balconies also being wood, the rest of it, our buildings are in great shape, is what I'm trying to say. The next zone we look at is that first 1.5 meters around the building, and for those that aren't metric, we're talking about 4.5, 5 feet. And you can see that the blue line barely appears on that graph. And so what that means is that we have a lot of bark mulch and or coniferous vegetation around our house, or storage, or things that are become ember traps and become easily ignited by the embers. And then we move out to zone 1, which is 10 meters out, or about 35 feet. And again, we have a lot of red there. And so that what comes into play there are things like stored combustibles, so firewood piles, vehicles, RVs, boats, things that become significant heat release objects when they're on fire, and that radiant heat can transfer the fire to your home, outbuildings, vegetation, etc. And I just want to be clear that the program isn't about walking into a property and telling a homeowner that they need to cut down every tree on their property. In the coastal region, especially from an ecological point of view, trees and healthy stands of trees with the canopies are a good thing. They help reduce the surface temperatures, they help retain moisture, and a lot of other good things. So last year we offered homeowner grants. So if they took up the challenge of any of the recommendations on their property, they were eligible for a rebate of up to $500. And we can see that while regionally the ACRD took up most of the rebates, our partner at the shop, they were the next in line for the most people that participated in that program. So we've submitted the grant application. We developed the work, or did the work on developing the grant application for the 2023 to 25 grant through the end of last grant cycle. It's a very detailed process, and a lot of research goes into it. We partnered with the city, Tishot, and Hopetchet First Nations, and our project is still continuing to emphasize activities to improve public awareness, public education, and encourage mitigation action. When we say mitigation action, we're just asking people to, take up the challenge of doing some things around their properties to increase that resiliency. Again, central to this project is having a Fire Smart Coordinator in to coordinate that and increase our program. So we're still offering our residential home assessments, and this year for the next 2 years, the rebate is up to $1,000, and it is also going to include now new construction and or renovation work. So if we're hoping that incentive will encourage residents to really get involved in updating their properties. We just very excited to announce that we got our curbside waste pickup started this week. We're using the same contractor that we did last grant cycle, which was great. We had a lot of good feedback from the service that they provided. So a homeowner is allowed to request a pickup. They're allowed 2 loads of prunings, tree branches, that kind of stuff. No invasive species and no construction material. And the contractor will show up, pick it up, and take it away. And all of that is just organized through calling the front desk of the office or emailing FireSmart or firesmart@acrd.bc.ca. We're really trying hard to get what we call a FireSmart recognized neighborhood program going. And so that's where a neighborhood collectively gets together, and besides doing the work on their own properties, they collectively do work in the neighborhood. So that might be something as simple as just walking the perimeter of the block, if you have some green space around you, and just picking up the dead and down branches or trimming some stuff back, that sort of thing. It varies from area to area, and we're really hoping to get a neighborhood into that category. When they do meet those requirements, they're able to access a little more money for their annual events that they put together. So mitigation work on critical infrastructure was a high priority last year, and we did a lot of work in the area. And we also did a number of assessments, and 10 of those sites received funding for work in this grant cycle. We just completed the work at the West Coast General Hospital West Haven site last week, and it looks much better there. We're going to do 18 sites over this next 2 years and do assessments on critical infrastructure and community assets. And just for clarity, the community infrastructure might be a fire department, a police station, an ambulance station, a hospital, or buildings that are designated in our emergency planning. A community asset, and they're owned by local governments. Community assets might be owned by a society, a church group, or something like that, but there may have been identified as a potential site in our emergency plan, say for group shelter or something like that. And so they've been included in this process where we can apply for future grant money to do mitigation work around those properties. Last year, we completed a community wildfire resiliency plan for the Long Beach area. Our current plans that we had were in place that only included the Alberni Valley and Bamfield. And so with the completion of that plan, we completed the planning for the entire region. And what those plans do is they provide a roadmap. There's recommendations in those plans as well. It provides a roadmap for what we're trying to achieve through our FireSmart grant priorities. And at the end of this cycle, we'll be updating our Alberni Valley Bamfield plan. We are going to host farm workshops again this year. We did 2 last year, and we'll offer them again through this grant cycle. We are a vast area, and we have a lot of various types of farming occurring in our area. And there's a lot of money on the table from the province through various avenues to help farmers with their properties. And they've tied the wildfire piece to the FireSmart program. If you're aware of anybody that has any questions about that, please get them to contact me. I'm more than happy to work with them on what they can do to help improve their properties. We're going to host some wildfire mitigation specialist training. And so this program is sponsored by the BC Fire Chiefs Association through what we call a Home Partners program. And so besides myself in the Valley here, we have a number of individuals that are members of the various fire departments that have taken the local FireSmart representative training previously. So we're going to offer this training to them first, trying to build some capacity throughout the whole region so that we can offer assessments both to homes and neighborhoods in a more timely manner. It works to build our capacity to handle an area this size. Wildfire preparedness days are a high priority. And so traditionally, wildfire preparedness happens in May. I didn't start until near the end of May this year again. But we are going to throw May away and just do as many wildfire preparedness events as we can throughout the region. Starting this weekend, we'll be at the Sprout Lake Fire Department's open house. And we're in discussions with Cherry Creek and some of the other departments to see if they're able to host us as well. It's a great way to attract the neighborhood to an event, get our message out, and give out some FireSmart branded items and engage with the community.
And there I am at the end of my presentation. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Randy. I'm sure being fire smart is on everybody's mind right now. So I predict you're in a very busy season coming up. Director Roth.
Yeah, I'm curious, has the ACRD building been assessed?
Through the chair, yes. So prior to me starting in the last year's grant cycle, the grant cycle previous to that, we had money in the grant to hire a consultant to do that work. So a number of properties, including the regional district building, were assessed, all the fire departments, hospital, that sort of stuff. And so the recommendations and those assessments is where we took our direction to apply for grant money to do mitigation work.
I can't remember exactly what's at the entranceway, but to me, it seems like a bit of a, we have to make some changes here. Okay, good.
Yeah, there are some changes that are recommended. And I'd like to make sure I emphasize to folks all of this work that we're recommending are just that, the recommendations. There's nothing regulatory about what we do. So it's not like a bylaw enforcement issue or something like that, or you have to. But the science behind this is based on decades of research. And as recently as in the spring here, when the fires were burning in Halifax, and the fire chief there was talking about the eeriness of how the fire moved around certain properties. That's not eeriness, that's buildings that had features that made them resilient to the wildfire. It happened in the Okanagan back in, 2003 or 06, I can't remember. And every fire since then, Fort Mac, all the way along. So,
Dr. McEwen.
Thank you. Through the chair, I heard in an earlier report that you will be conducting these services in Banfield. Are you also providing these services on the West Coast to Tofino and Ucluelet?
Yeah, through the chair, our capacity has been expanded a little bit with using the fire inspector in the city, the fire department to do the city assessments. So it is a significant goal of ours to provide both education and assessments to the Long Beach electoral area as well as Banfield. So last year in Banfield, we did some critical mitigation work around the fire departments and the water treatment plant. And in this grant cycle, we're focusing on some of the infrastructure in the Long Beach electoral area, like water treatment areas and that sort of stuff. So there'll be more work happening out there.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Randy? Director Sparrow.
Are you going to expand this to critical infrastructure that's not government owned, like TELUS and things like that? Is that part of your plan moving forward, or do you know?
Well, we're following the guidance that's put forward by FireSmart BC and then the people that manage the grants through UBCM. And so currently what they've identified those two types of assessments, the critical infrastructure and the community assets. Larger, or I guess it's more of a provincial level approach to maintaining things like communication, transportation. Those assets are managed at a provincial level. And so it would be up to TELUS and Rogers and anybody else that has communication infrastructure to make the province aware of that.
Seeing no further questions, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation, and don't work too hard this summer. Could I get a motion that Board of Directors receives the staff report? Moved by Director Ross, second by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Under unfinished business, Director Roth has something that she would like to read. It's a response from the Beaver Creek Fire Chief.
That's right. I did considerable research in the last week, and it started with a mail out from the Beaver Creek Fire Chief. Anyway, sorry it's so long, but it's necessary. Okay, hopefully you've had the opportunity to read the 2022 ACRD Fire Services Review. The 208-page review was conducted by Dave Mitchell, who was retired Division Chief Communications in 1998 from Vancouver Fire and Rescue Services, following a career spanning 32 years. Gordon Anderson, who retired in 2019, with 29 years in the fire service, serving the last 5 as the British Columbia Fire Commissioner. Jim Cook, who's an experienced professional with over 38 years of experience in fire services. Wayne Humphrey, who has over 40 years experience in BC Fire Service. And finally, Ian McDonald, who's a retired corporate securities lawyer who practiced international corporate law in Canada and United Kingdom. Between them, they have 139 years experience in fire services. The report is very well written, and I appreciate the comprehensive nature of the report. In 2021, the ACRD commissioned a review to assess the administrative burden facing fire departments in the context of their operational mandates. The review examined the underlying regulatory structure and obligations affecting the fire departments, ranging from the Fire Services Act, WorkSafe BC requirements, and applicable service and aid agreements to training, budgeting processes, staffing, facilities, and equipment. The 208-page report was completed in March 2022. According to the report, the principal theme that emerged was the need to provide additional support to the fire departments to assist them with their administrative requirements and obligations. The review concluded that support is best provided through a centralization of certain administrative operations, such as the creation of maintenance of standardized occupational health and safety program, standardized operational guidelines, and the creation of shared training plans and records keeping, and the provision of administration support to each department when required to remove that burden from the individual fire departments. The review also noted that centralization would have several notable benefits. It would ensure that each fire department is operating to a similar compliance standard. It would better enable oversight and understanding of each fire department's operations and challenges, and it would streamline updating the fundamental administrative documents and processes as statutory and regulatory requirements change. By providing this assistance, the ACRD would be better able, each fire department, to focus on operational matters and ensure that it could provide the highest level of service to its residents in a manner that's both safe and effective. This comprehensive review contains some surprising information about Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department. Statistics about the types of incidents that the fire department respond to were provided in the report. The statistics cover an almost 6-year period, 5.83 years to be exact, from January 2016 to October 2021. During that time frame, there was an average of 3.4 structure fires each year in Beaver Creek. The report also noted that the primary response types for the volunteer fire department were medical emergencies, motor vehicle incidents, and rescue. These represent 66.4% of the primary resources for Beaver Creek. In terms of the total of all fire-related incidents, they represent 10.7% of the responses in Beaver Creek. The remaining incident types were alarms ringing, reports to hydro, burning complaints, and inquiries of the duty officer. I was surprised to learn that medical emergencies outnumbered fire-related responses by such a large degree. Why are medical emergencies the fire department's responsibility? There aren't any regulatory requirements for fire departments to attend medical call-outs. BC paramedics are tasked with that responsibility. Ambulance services are funded by the province of BC. Fire services are funded by local government. Why are local taxpayers paying duplicate to respond to medical emergencies? News reports talk about BC ambulance slow response times. However, in July 2021, the provincial government announced that they're strengthening BC ambulance system to ensure it's faster and more responsive to British Columbians. Have there been changes to ambulance services in Alberta Valley? Are there response problems still in the Valley locally? Medical emergencies are a large part of local fire protection services. According to a comment made online by a Beaver Creek volunteer firefighter, since January 1st, 2023, the volunteer fire department has responded to 28 medical call-outs. Perhaps we should be lobbying the provincial government to enhance ambulance services in our community. Perhaps we should be sending the BC government an invoice to cover the cost of volunteer fire department responding to calls for medical assistance. This is an issue that the people of Beaver Creek need to decide. Do the majority of people in Beaver Creek wish the volunteer fire department to continue to respond to medical call-outs? In July 2021, BC government news release, government officials said that they've directed the Emergency Medical Assistance Management Licensing Board to examine expanding firefighter scope of practice. The deadline for the recommendations was September 2021. Did the firefighter's scope of practice expand? And if so, what are the new responsibilities? I couldn't find that information anywhere. On or about Monday, June 5th, Beaver Creek residents received a 2-page report titled Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department Frequently Asked Questions. The first sentence in the report said the 2023 ACRD financial plan includes the transition of the Beaver Creek Fire Chief from a volunteer to a full-time position. That is not what we agreed to during budget talks. We agreed to push the start date ahead for the new position from April to July, with the understanding that if the public disagrees, we will revisit the issue. On June 5th, I took a photograph of the 2-page report and posted it on my political page on Facebook. I also shared it on a page where many people in Beaver Creek visit to gather and share information. To date, there have been 126 comments posted online, both for and against creating the new position. I also received personal messages, emails, and telephone calls. In the days that followed, the comments online revealed that more people were against making the change than for it. Some people fear what might happen without a proper plan in place. One person online said, "What are the guarantees this doesn't explode into a financial disaster? Can anyone show me where there's, after 5 years as a paid chief, the rest of the volunteers were not on the payroll?" These are good questions. Where will the fire department be in 5 years? Changing the fire chief position into a paid position changes the fire department from a volunteer model to a composite model. Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department's report did not discuss the fire department moving to a composite model. Composite fire departments can be very expensive for property taxpayers, particularly when there is little industrial base in the service area that would benefit from the service. The Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department's report said that the volunteer chief model does not provide sufficient time resources to support the department. The centralized volunteer fire department model set out in the fire services review offers a way to lessen the workload on volunteer fire chiefs and departments. Under a centralized administration system, the current ACRD Regional Fire Services Manager would be responsible for the creation and maintenance of standardized occupational health and safety policies, standardized operational guidelines, the creation of training plans and record-keeping systems, and other regulatory matters that need to be addressed. As well, the Regional Fire Services Manager would have support to carry out the task. One of the recommendations from the review was the ACRD create a new administrative support position that reports directly to the Fire Services Manager. The duties of the position would include the management of all administrative records and reports related to the operation of the ACRD Fire Services. By providing this assistance, volunteer fire chiefs would be able to better focus on operational matters and ensure that they can continue to provide the highest level of service to Beaver Creek residents in a manner that's both safe and effective. The administrative support position could be filled by a volunteer fire chief. The cost of the position would be borne by Beaver Creek taxpayers, then shared between service areas that choose to participate in a centralized administration service. The Fire Services Review presented more than 40 recommendations. None of the recommendations included transitioning fire chiefs from volunteers to full-time positions, nor did any of the recommendations include changing the volunteer fire service or fire departments into composite fire departments. The Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department's report also talked about volunteer firefighters. The report said attracting, training, and retaining volunteers was challenging. The 2022 Fire Services Review addressed this issue as well. One of the recommendations is the ACRD considered implementing improvements to the compensation structure to enhance recruitment and retention of volunteers. Another recommendation is that the ACRD consider implementing a wage loss program or policy for department members while attending training and education programs. I think Beaver Creek taxpayers would be pleased to compensate or better compensate volunteer firefighters. All in all, Beaver Creek would be opening the door to a centralized administration for fire services where each participating area will receive shared cost benefits. Down the road, Bamfield and Cherry Creek may choose to become part of the centralized service. Sorry, just one sec here. At a board meeting on December 14, 2022, the ACRD agreed to apply for a restructure planning grant from the BC government to study governance options for Cherry Creek Improvement District, including the potential conversion to regional district services. The BC government agreed to provide funding to undertake the review. Cherry Creek Improvement District provides drinking water and fire protection. It is likely the improvement district will be dissolved and rolled into the regional district in the near future. That means the ACRD would be responsible for another fire service. That could also mean the ACRD would be employing 3 full-time fire chiefs and the current fire services manager to serve a population of 7,527, which is the population of Beaver Creek, Cherry Creek, and Sprout Lake. After reading through the comments online, I understand that most people want to see a well-thought-out plan before any changes occur. They also want to be part of making that plan. We need to make that happen. There isn't anything stopping us from creating an online survey to question Beaver Creek residents about the fire protection services they want to see. We could also hold a town hall meeting to discuss the issue. I will provide the ACRD a screenshot of all online comments and copy of all the communications received regarding this issue. But this time, I'd like to make a motion to put a hold on hiring a full-time fire chief until a plan is developed. The plan would take into consideration the 2022 ACRD Fire Services Review, which recommended centralized administration. I request a deadline of December 31st, 2023 to complete the plan so that the public has had an opportunity to provide their input. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Roth. What I might suggest in the future, it may have been more appropriate if you would have had that in the agenda so we could have the board of directors would have had an opportunity to read and really digest the information. It's really hard when somebody's reading it because I read my agendas like 3 times, so I'll make sure that I understand everything. And with some reading, it was very difficult for me to comprehend everything. And in regards to your comments about the increased usage of fire departments for medical treatments, I actually put forth the motion at ABICC, and it get approved and is going to UBCM. So I think you've got that part covered. I think Director Cote had her hand up.
I'm just wanting to refer this to staff because there's a lot of information there. A lot of it is hearsay or talking about comments on Facebook or something. To me, that's not valid information. So I would refer this to staff for a report. Thank you.
Yeah, just a moment. Daniel, you have your hand up.
Thank you. And thank you, Director Roth, for putting so much effort into that. I think I heard you say that you were going to share that, and that would be appreciated from a staff perspective. As you know, the outreach or the FAQ that was sent out did direct the general public back to our offices with comments. So any supplementary comments that you may have collected would be useful for us to put in the context of the other information that came through. Staff are planning on doing a follow-up report. I think that was the original plan following the FAQ, and we do intend on bringing that forward prior to the final decision of advancing with any paid position. That was the plan, and that is the plan that staff are following through on. So any information that you can provide would be greatly appreciated. We'll add into our report to the board, and if there's any additional questions that are in there, it was hard for me to keep up with everything that was being said. So similar to what the chair was saying, if you could share that, it allows us to make sure that we are comprehensively addressing any of the concerns or questions. Thank you.
Dr. Roth.
Yeah, I would like to say that almost all of this is written verbatim exactly from the Fire Services Review. And I'd also like to say that the information that was sent out to the public was sent out or received on June the 5th. And from what I understand, we were supposed to be hiring someone or the fire chief on July the 1st. So time is of the essence. And that was why, I mean, I only could put this information together this week because that's when the people of Beaver Creek received the information in the mail. So it's, the timeliness is because of that. Thank you.
Daniel?
Thank you. Through the chair, yeah, we're aware of the estimated timelines that identified July 1st for the budget purposes, but we are also aware of the fact that we did do the outreach, and in the process of getting information out with everything else, there were delays, and that's That's why the report that's coming back to the board will likely be at the end of this month or early in July. I don't think staff are, well, I know that staff understand that they're not proceeding with the hiring of any position in the absence of a decision from the board. Putting the budget forward is one thing. Actioning still requires us to follow all the steps. So I'm sorry if there was misunderstanding there. As staff, we intend to continue the process. There will be a report that comes back to the board, and the board will make an ultimate decision on the next steps with regard to the full-time position. Thank you.
Dr. Roth. I'd be more than happy to provide this report and all the screenshots and all the information that I received for that. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to take your motion off the floor then? Sure. Thank you. No question. Oh, Dr. Sparrows.
Yeah, I'm way over here. When we talked about communication for a little bit this last meeting, you know, the OCPs and the bylaws and that, I think this is also reflective of what happens here. That frequently asked questions put out there, and then it's sort of a dialogue, but we got to do something better than what we're doing, because it just seems to be a turmoil out there. And I didn't get to go to the budget meeting, so I hear things the same time they do in the newspapers and when it comes to my mailbox, because I don't know what's going on sometimes either. Like Sport Lake got a new fire chief. Congratulations. I found that out by a blurb that came out of this place. I didn't even know that was happening. So we have to do better our communication and engaging the public to try and figure out what the needs are. It's not doing what we need to do.
Thank you. Okay, so no questions from the public. Is there any questions online, Heather?
Thank you. We do have one attendee on Zoom, so I just advise that person, if they have a question, they can put their question in the Q&A segment of Zoom. And I'm just going to check the email. 1 second. There are no emails received and no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I get a motion to recess the regular Board of Directors meeting in order to conduct the Regional Hospital District meeting? Moved by Director Sparrow, second by Director Roth. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, I'd like to call the order of the Hospital District Board of Directors meeting and recognize that we're conducting this meeting on the unceded territories of the Hupa-Chesed and Shuswap First Nations, and recognizing that we have directors calling in from other territories, and we'd like to acknowledge those First Nations with our respect and our gratitude. And a notice to attendees and delegates that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the Regional District website. So we have an agenda in front of us. Is there any additions to the agenda? Dr. Cote.
Just a short report it was a mental health conversation with Bonnie Henry.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, including the additions from Director Cote? Moved by Director Cote, seconded by Director McClellan. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. So we have the minutes from the Alberni-Claycott Regional Hospital District Board of Directors meeting held on May 10th, 2023. Is there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, could I get a motion to approve the minutes as presented? Moved by Director Roth, second by Director Cote. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. So we have correspondence for information from Health Canada, a public advisory release from Health Canada, May 10, 2023, regarding copycat edible cannabis products causing serious harm to children. Can I get a motion to receive the correspondence for information? Moved by Director Roth, seconded by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Now for reports, Banfield Health Center, Director Beck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief. The focus in the conversation that I had with staff discussed the detour alternate route and the impact on the Banfield Healthcare Center, and it primarily was getting supplies in and out, and staffing. And just when you think you've got the staffing sorted out by flying them in, the winds came up yesterday, and the pilot refused to fly. So the best laid plan goes awry. But everyone, again, just like everybody, and the ACRD is doing a tremendous job to make this work to the best of their ability. And that's all I have today on the Banfield Health Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Beckett. Alberni Quayquat Continuing Care Society, Director Siga.
They did have a Michael Kerr presentation scheduled for June 12th, but that had to be canceled. And the AGM was scheduled for June 27th, and that looks like it's going to be delayed as well. Thank you.
West Coast Native Healthcare Society, Director Cote.
Thank you. Meeting tomorrow. We'll report.
Tofino General Hospital, Director Steer.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few things to add. Speaking with the site director, some of the mitigation work around drainage is still continuing and hopefully completed by the winter time, fall rains coming. There's been an interesting delay in the renovations to the admin area around there, and it's primarily related to an interesting cause. There has been funding that has been allocated to the Tofino General Hospital for a PSO, or a public protection service officer, two of them, for 24/7. The problem is that they have nowhere to put those people. So they're looking at maybe a potential reconfiguration in some of the renovation plans at this point. So that was something that is ongoing. There is excellent staffing right now from a nursing perspective. There was some hiccups a little earlier on in the season, but we are well staffed, looking forward to the summer season. There are some issues around in terms of recruitment retention for housekeeping. One of our big issues still is housing for our public health workers in the Tofino General Hospital in general. But there are some good news. There was at least one lease arrangement made locally with a private homeowner to accommodate that. And the small specialist, I'll call it a pup tent almost, a small dwelling in the parking lot there, has been housing specialists coming up to the Tofino General Hospital to provide services quite regularly. So that's it for Tofino General Hospital.
Thank you, Director Steer. Alberni Quayquat Health Network. Director Cote, did you have anything you wanted to add to the draft minutes?
No, they're attached. Thank you.
West Coast General Hospital. There should only be one more construction meeting regarding the renovations at our emergency room facility at our West Coast General Hospital. They're still putting on the finishing touches on the family room and the seclusion room. A final inspection is scheduled for the 23rd, and the goal is still to be completely finished by the end of June. I know Director Cote has asked for a tour, and the tour was given by the donors, and they forgot to include us. So it was pretty disappointing to hear that. And they can't do a tour now because of patient confidentiality. So what I've asked for, if they could maybe just have us meet in the lobby and they could just tell us what they've done, which might, when it's not going to be as good as a tour, but at least we'll know what renovations they've done and what they've added. So I'm just waiting to hear on that. So hopefully that will take place. Director Cote.
Thank you. There was a webinar meeting with Bonnie Henry and Mayor Richard Stewart and Brian Finkel from past UBCM president on mental health in society. They talked about the difference between mental health and mental illness, and that 1 in 5 people in BC have mental illness, have mental health issues. 21% of Canadians meet the addictions criteria, which is quite startling. So best practices for local leaders was suggested. So consider language and framing. Center the voices of people living and have lived experience. Ensure a human rights and evidence-based approach. Consider social determinants of health and decision-making. An advocate for community and or health response, shifting from crisis to care in BC. Community lead. There's a PACT expansion. I forget what PACT stands for, but Bonnie Henry talked about substance abuse and mental health and the unintended consequences. There's a survey that's going to be coming out again. There was one in 2020 and one in 2021. The one in 2020 had 400,000 responses. In 2021, there was 200,000. Now looking at young adults with more compounding issues, anxiety and depression are most resilient. Teenage girls, gender, racial, low income feel the more impact from these. Alcohol consumption is up in BC, mostly between the ages 18 and 49. Also, along with that comes in-home violence increase. So Bonnie talked about her own situation with conflict coming from, people from the community reaching out, and the mental health issues for leaders. So we're hearing more and more about this at UBCM. That's part of the reason why I was invited to this, is because I'm on the Health and Social Development Committee with UBCM. So she said we have a crisis pain, and that produces the drug problem, which stems from the pain. The hydromorphine is not working, that's being prescribed. So they're looking at new ways to deal with it. And how do we support these polarized conditions? So disinformation, untruths that are spread, hard to change or manage, pre-bunking, manipulative language, incoherence of information, scapegoating, and blaming the messenger. So communications is still key. Actions do not amplify actions, so others do. Try to lift others up. So this was just a suggestion for leaders to try to work together. Bonnie Henry said she has to avoid social media altogether now. She has had threats. She's had stress put upon her, and understands that local government leaders also do. The change and challenging is needed, but it is challenging. So data and evidence are critical, values and judgments and preference balance. So that was the message that we got from her. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cote. Could I get a motion that the Regional Hospital Board of Directors receive reports A to G? Moved by Director Ross, second by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. No questions from the public. Is there any questions online, Heather?
There are no attendees. And just give me a second while I look at the responses. And there are no emails. Thank you.
Thank you. Get a motion to adjourn. Moved by Director Cote, second by Director McClement. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Can I get a motion to reconvene back to the regular Board of Directors meeting? Moved by Director Ross, second by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. So I'd like to make a motion to go in camera. Motion to close the meeting to the public as per the Community Charter, Sections 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the regional district or another position appointed by the regional district. And 91F, law enforcement, if the board considers that the closure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation of under or enforcement of an enactment. Can they get a seconder? Seconded by Director Roth. All in favor to go in camera? Any